Chapter 43-42. Before she could say anything, her forehead was covered in cold sweat from the pain. Yihuan instinctively wanted to pull her foot back, but Qin Mo held it tightly and didn't give her a chance to let go. He looked up at her and said in a lower voice, "Bear with it." Yihuan was in so much pain that her lips were almost bleeding. She tried to pull her foot back a few more times, but she still couldn't pull it away. Qin Mo looked up at her again and rubbed for a while. Yihuan fell onto the sofa in pain, clenching her fists and biting them in her mouth. It hurt so much. He put her foot down and leaned forward. He placed his hands on both sides of her body and covered her with his body. Yihuan opened her eyes and looked at him. Her heart was pounding unnaturally. "What do you want? What do you think?" Qin Mo's voice was abnormally hoarse. His fingers gently pulled down her sling and he frowned. "Will this break?" Yihuan knew that he was unhappy. How could he not know the type of gown? There were so many female celebrities in King Entertainment, and they wore sling that were much thinner. How could he not be worried? He had a dark mind and couldn't bear to see her dressed like this. Sure enough, Qin Mo's fingers moved more dangerously and his voice was hoarse. "You'll still expose yourself. Don't dress like this in the future." Yihuan's foot didn't hurt too much under his control, but she couldn't move at all. She could only lean against the sofa and squint at the handsome man in front of her. Then she smiled and said, "President Qin, I'm not your wife for a long time." His fingers gently caressed her delicate neck, and finally pinched her sharp chin as he stared at her little face. To be honest, his gaze was quite terrifying. At least, Yihuan had never seen him like this before. Actually, she had seen it before. It was the night of their wedding. She fell asleep in her pajamas, and he came back after drinking. He saw her curled up on the bed. Yihuan would never forget that look for the rest of his life. Moreover, he had hurt her very much that night. He had no experience at all. Although he was very gentle, the look in his eyes changed when he woke up. Later in their married life, Qin Mo was not gentle for a long time, and they were not harmonious. Until one time, when he was drunk, he trapped her under his body and tortured her for the whole night. That night, he loved her many times and said a lot. Only then did she know that he knew that she liked Rongyu. After that night of gentleness, there was no more gentleness. Their relationship had always been very stiff, and they couldn't put their feelings into words until now. Yihuan looked at Qin Mo and saw that his eyes were full of hope. She closed her eyes slightly and said in a low voice, "We've separated. Then aren't you dressed like this to seduce me?" His voice was low and husky as his slender fingers gently caressed her face. Yihuan couldn't stand it. "Qin Mo, you're being unreasonable." Qin Mo chuckled softly, cupped her face with both hands and kissed her. Yihuan twisted her head, but in the end, she couldn't break free because his hands were firmly holding her face, not letting her move. In the end, it was a little messy, and they finished it on the sofa. After it was over, Qin Mo lowered his head to look at Yihuan, who was leaning on him. There was a touch of gentleness in his eyes. "Let's reconcile, okay?" Men were generally like this. Once their bodies were comfortable, they would naturally lose their temper. Yihuan could only lie on her stomach. Her feet were still in so much pain that she couldn't move, so she could only lie on her stomach. She wanted to talk about new wife number 1, hubby addicted to pampering, with more like-minded people, talking about life and looking for bosom friends. Chapter 43-43. She said no in a low voice. Qin Mo thought she was just throwing a tantrum. He kissed her cheek and got up to carry her. Before he went to the bedroom, he lowered his gaze and looked at the gowns scattered all over the floor. It was a little violent. For the rest of the night, it was as if they were in the past. Qin Mo was very satisfied. In the latter half of the night, they hugged each other to sleep. When he woke up in the morning, he felt especially comfortable. The gloom he had over the past few days had been swept away. Yihuan's exquisite little face opened his eyes. She had become a lot paler recently. Actually, she had been very fair when she was young. It was only because she had been filming in America that she had not taken care of her skin. And now, her porcelain white skin complemented her exquisite little face. She was really beautiful. He had always liked her and had high hopes for her. As he looked at her, he felt a desire that he shouldn't have. But he also knew that he had gone overboard last night. Hence, he only kissed her lips and got out of bed to make breakfast. Yihuan's place was very good. The kitchen was well equipped and polished, which meant that she never used the stove. Chinemo wasn't surprised, because Yihuan didn't know how to cook in the first place. When he got out of bed, there were no clothes for him to change into. He put on the clothes from last night, wiped his face, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Actually, he wanted to sleep for a while more, but he had a meeting at 9:30, so he had to leave in a while. It was already 8:30 when Chinemo finished making breakfast. He ate a little and went to the bedroom. Yihuan was still asleep. He squatted down and said in a raspy voice, "I'm going to the office first. Don't forget to eat breakfast when you wake up." Yihuan opened her eyes, looking a little dazed. His fingers gently caressed her red lips, and his voice became even more raspy. "I'm leaving." Yihuan looked at him softly. Chinemo was naturally moved. He went forward and kissed her before tidying up his clothes and leaving. That day, all the employees of King Entertainment felt that President Qin was in a good mood. The gloom from before had been swept away. Or rather, he was dissatisfied. In the morning, Chinemo had a meeting. In the afternoon, he wanted to call Yihuan, but he gave up after thinking about it. Instead, he read a magazine and casually flipped through it. Then he saw a nice watch that suited Yihuan very well. He pressed the intercom. "Secretary He, come in for a moment." Secretary He came over immediately. "President Qin, what's the matter?" Chinemo pushed the magazine in front of her. "Order this watch for me. I want it before this afternoon." Secretary He was a little surprised. He lowered his head to take a look. It was a high-end gem watch from a luxury brand. One watch cost more than 3 million. Money was not important. What was important was that President Qin had personally chosen it. That was the main point. Moreover, it should be the woman that President Qin spent the night with last night. Chinemo glared at Secretary He and said impatiently, "I'm giving it to Yihuan. What are you thinking about?" Secretary He blinked again. They had reconciled. But she moved very quickly to order it. After making the payment, the shiny watch was delivered to King Entertainment in minutes. Chinemo held the watch and looked at it for a long time before putting it down. When it was time to get off work, he called Yihuan. Her cell phone was switched off. He frowned and drove directly to her apartment. She wasn't at home. He could only wait downstairs and call anyone she could possibly contact. After calling around, he still couldn't find her. Chinemo was a little annoyed, but he suppressed it. His intuition told him that she was purposely not meeting him. Her cell phone was switched off, and he couldn't find her anywhere. Chapter 43-44. In the end, he went to her office. The staff said that Yihuan didn't come to work today. Chinemo frowned and left first. He was driving aimlessly. He didn't know where Yihuan was, or why she didn't want to see him. He thought that they had reconciled after last night, but now that he thought about it, it was obvious that she didn't think so. Chinmo's fingers gripped the steering wheel as he drove along the brightly lit streets. When he passed by a cafe, he saw Yihuan. She was wearing a pair of black trousers and a white sweater. She looked pure and pretty. Sitting opposite her was a very young man. One look, and one could tell that he was a good-looking man. Also, he was about the same age as Yihuan. Chinmo's fingers were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were almost white. He held back his urge to go over. When Yihuan looked up, she saw Chinemo. He was sitting in the car, looking terribly gloomy. Yihuan looked away and ignored him. He couldn't take it anymore. The person she was meeting was just an ordinary friend. She could be considered as a university classmate who needed her help with a small matter. A cup of coffee was nothing. He didn't think it was a big deal for him to meet Ai Jia. What happened last night wouldn't change anything. It was just a physiological need. Also, she had sprained her ankle, so she couldn't escape even if she wanted to. Besides, Chinmo's driving skills were really good, and she felt quite comfortable. Yihuan had never been a pretentious person. Yihuan didn't care about Chinemo. He didn't care if he was unhappy, but she was the one who was unhappy. Their current situation was more serious than the Cold War. They were on the verge of breaking up. In fact, she hadn't decided yet. Or maybe she was too soft-hearted. But deep down, she knew that she loved him. That was why she was so worried and couldn't let go of him. Yi-hwan returned home at 10 p.m. She drove back by herself. Downstairs, she didn't see Chin-mo's car. She heaved a sigh of relief. If he went crazy again tonight, she wouldn't be able to take it. Yi-hwan got out of the car and walked towards the elevator. Chin-mo leaned against the elevator door, looking upset. Yi-hwan paused and looked at him. "What can I do for you, President Chin?" Chin-mo looked at her quietly and smiled bitterly. "Yi-hwan, I like you. But it's because I like you that you're trying your best to ruin this relationship, isn't it?" Her lips moved, but she didn't say anything for a long time. Chin-mo closed his eyes and didn't say anything. He just took out a box and put it in her hand. "This is for you. If you don't like it, throw it away." After saying that, he walked out on his own. Yi-hwan stood behind him and looked at his back, feeling a little lonely under the light. She wanted to call out to him, but for a long time, she couldn't say a word. After a long time, Chin-mo turned around and looked at her. It was quiet. "Yi-hwan, I've never changed. I've never liked anyone since you were young." His gaze was unfathomable, and Yi-hwan couldn't understand what he meant. She was a little afraid, but she didn't know what she was afraid of. Finally, Chin-mo laughed self-deprecatingly. "Even if I put the world in your hands, you won't believe that I love you." Chapter 43-45. There was a hint of moisture in her eyes. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She said slowly, "If that's the case, then let's do this." She still said it and looked at him. She didn't know where she got the courage from, but she quickly walked over and stuffed the box into his hands. "This is for you." The moment the box was in his hands, her eyes became a little watery. She held it in. She turned and left. This time, Chin-mo didn't stop her. He just looked at her back quietly. He threw the box in his hands into the trash can. But when he got into the car, he closed the door and rummaged in the trash for a while before taking it back. He looked at the box and thought about how he loved and hated Yi-hwan. He wanted to throw it away but couldn't bear to. In the end, Chin-mo still left. This time he didn't ask her to stay. Their relationship went back to the freezing point. They didn't contact each other for a week, and Chin Anlin's birthday was coming. Yi-hwan didn't have to attend, but Kaim and the Chin family had a deep relationship. As a junior, she had to attend. Soo-ching had a lot of opinions about this. She said to her husband, "Soo-hung, I heard from Liangqiu that they're preparing for a blind date for Chin-mo. There will be 3 or 4 candidates for the dinner. Why did you let Yi-hwan go? It's so worrisome." "I only agreed because I saw Chin-mo's sincerity. But look, it's only been a few months, and it's already like this." Kaim looked at his wife helplessly. "If she doesn't go, I'll think that Yi-hwan can't let go." Soo-ching was a little angry. "Actually, it's Chin-mo who can't let go. If it wasn't for him, Yi-hwan would have found her happiness. I think that Rong-yu is a good guy too. I didn't expect him to find a third-rate celebrity. Soo-hung, you don't know how smart the girls in the entertainment industry are. She's with Rong-yu now, but she'll probably throw him away after using him. I've already said that if your daughter wants to be with Rong-yu in the future, I won't agree." Kaim smiled helplessly. "I don't think that will happen." Soo-ching was still worried. "You're always worried. Anyway, don't get involved with Chin-mo and Rong-yu in the future. They are not good people." As a mother, the more she thought about it, the more her heart ached. Kaim sighed and didn't say anything else. Soo-chung was still worried, so she called Yi-hwan over to her place on the day of the banquet. She personally checked on Yi-hwan before she was satisfied. Humph, she might lose, but she didn't want to lose face. "Don't make it seem like no one wants my daughter." Yi-hwan was wearing a mint green moccasins. The color really made her look fresh, especially her beautiful neck and thin shoulders. She looked fresh and sexy, and didn't look like a woman in her early 30s at all. Her shoulder-length hair was pulled up in a bun. This was also the first time Yi-hwan had tried such a style. It was unnatural for her, but Soo-ching insisted. "Look at this small waist. It doesn't look like it has given birth to a child." Soo-ching was very satisfied. When she walked out like this, she would definitely look good. Why would she worry about not having a man? Yi-hwan was a little helpless. After a while she smiled bitterly. "Mom, it's a little too grand. It's just a birthday banquet, not a red carpet walk. What do you know? This kind of banquet is equivalent to a matchmaking party. I'm married, He-Huan said weakly. Su-Ching laughed coldly. Another divorce? Did you forget? Did you know that the Qin family found a few girls today? Su-Ching was speechless. Chapter 43-46. He-Huan was stunned and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Then she said bitterly, he is him and I am me. Su-Ching adjusted her clothes for her and sighed. Nothing else matters. I just don't want you to feel wronged. Do you understand? He-Huan pursed her lips and looked straight at Su-Ching. She realized that her mother, who used to be like a young girl, was slowly aging. She looked down and said in a low voice, I understand. She really understood. She had always been willful and did whatever she wanted. Her parents worried about her. He-Huan was silent for a while and said, Mom, let me go on a blind date. He-Huan was stunned. She didn't expect He-Huan to think that way. Actually, she didn't mean it that way. But she wouldn't reject He-Huan's request. She and Qin-Emo didn't get along well. Maybe they really didn't get along. He-Huan went to the hotel with her parents. GM Hotel. Looking at the huge signboard, she thought of the time when she and Qin-Emo were young, and he brought her here for a night. She couldn't help but feel an indescribable feeling. She got in the car and stood in the night in a mint green dress, like a fairy in the night sky. What's wrong? Su-Ching walked over and asked. He-Huan shook her head and smiled. Nothing. Let's go in. Kaim brought his wife and daughter in, one in each hand. The relationship between their family and the Qin family was a bit complicated. Fortunately, Qin Anlin and Yu Liangqiu attached great importance to it, so others couldn't say anything. He-Huan's appearance was a bit stunning. Qin-Emo slowly walked down the stairs and saw He-Huan standing in the hall. There were so many people there, but He-Huan looked very different from the others. Qin-Emo was dressed in a classic black and white western shirt. He was surrounded by a few girls from good family backgrounds. They were all very young, and their figures and appearances were all top-notch. It was certain that they would produce excellent heirs for the Qin family. He-Huan understood at first glance. She didn't say anything and just smiled. Qin-Mo's gaze became a little deep, and he also quietly looked at her for a while. Then he talked to the girls around him. She didn't know what he said, but the girls all laughed. But they seemed to be fighting for the top position. His eyes inadvertently swept past He-Huan. But He-Huan had already gone to greet his parents. He left his female companions behind and walked over as well. Seeing that it was him, Yu Liangqiu smiled and said, Qin-Emo is here. Your Uncle Kaim and Auntie Su are here. And He-Huan is so beautiful today. He-Huan smiled. Where's He-Huan? Yu Liangqiu sighed. Maybe she ate something bad at lunch. She has diarrhea, so I let her stay at home with the auntie. The air conditioning in the hotel is too strong. He-Huan was worried, but she only nodded. That's true. She still looked outside and silently looked at the time. In fact, she knew in her heart that it wasn't that He-Huan had a stomachache, but this was a blind date, and it was inconvenient for He-Huan to be there. She didn't know why she felt a little sad. She didn't want He-Huan to see Qin-Emo marry someone else in the future. She thought that maybe she could raise He-Huan. Qin-Emo didn't agree, but she would find a way to persuade him. Anyway, if he married again, there would be a woman who could give him a son. Because of He-Huan, He-Huan was a little absent-minded. When she turned around, she happened to see Qin-Emo. She was in a trance again. Qin-Emo reached out to support her, and his eyes fell on her face. After a long time he whispered, You don't look good. Chapter 43-47. I'm fine. He-Huan shook her head. She broke free from him and wanted to leave, but he grabbed her arm and said in a low voice, Will you dance with me for the opening dance? He-Huan was stunned for a moment before she smiled faintly. It's not appropriate today. Not appropriate. Those 3 words made Qin-Emo frown again. He wanted to ask what was not appropriate, but He-Huan had already left. She went to the balcony and took out her phone to call the Qin mansion. She wanted to hear He-Huan's voice. Previously, she had told her mother that it was a blind date, but now she didn't want it anymore. She wanted He-Huan. If Qin-Emo were to remarry, she had to take care of He-Huan. The phone was picked up by the auntie on the other end of the line. The auntie was very enthusiastic and still called her young mistress. Yihuan didn't correct her and directly asked how Yihuan was. Who knew that Yihuan's voice would immediately come from the other end of the line? Mom. Yihuan had an indescribable feeling in her heart. Her voice was also hoarse. Yihuan, does your stomach still hurt? Yihuan shook her head. No. Yihuan's eyes were a little watery. Have you eaten? Yes, auntie's baby food is delicious. It's different every day. Yihuan is very full, and I just miss mommy. Yihuan found an opportunity to act coquettishly. Yihuan gently licked her lips. Then mommy will come over to accompany you, okay? Yihuan agreed immediately. Yihuan put down her phone and turned around to see Su Cheng. Su Cheng's expression was indescribable. She sighed. Yihuan, you're really silly. Yihuan was dazed for a moment before she said, Mom, I gave birth to Yihuan. I didn't feel sorry for her in the past, but she was left alone at home tonight, and this is Qin Mo's blind date party. I can't accept it, and I can't dress like this to dance with others. Mom, I gave birth to Yihuan. I'm sorry. Her voice was choked with sobs. As she spoke, she leaned her head on Su Cheng's shoulder. Su Cheng's face was expressionless, but she gently stroked Yihuan's hair and whispered, I'm your mother too. I can understand how you feel. Just don't regret it. In fact, she also felt that it was a pity that they couldn't be together even though they loved each other. Both Yihuan and Qin Mo were proud, but Qin Mo usually gave in to Yihuan, but she couldn't figure out why. Yihuan apologized in a low voice and left the balcony. Half an hour later, she changed out of her luxurious clothes into jeans and a black t-shirt and drove away in a car. In the GM hotel, Qin Mo was still alone, holding a glass of red wine in his hand. He did not see Yihuan. He had looked around the banquet hall on the first floor, but she was nowhere to be seen. To be honest, she was stunning and beautiful tonight. Her hair had grown longer and was tied up in a bun. It was the first time he had seen her so gentle and youthful. Almost at that moment, he wanted her very much. But now she was gone. The opening dance was waiting for him to start. Just when Qin Mo had no choice but to choose a dance partner, the Qin residents called to say that Yihuan was missing. Qin Mo's whole body was stiff as he held his phone. How could it be? The housekeeper said carefully, It's... Young madam took Yihuan away. Qin Mo heaved a sigh of relief. Then he realized that Yihuan had gone to the Chiu garden. Chapter 43-48. At this time, the banquet was about to begin. Qin Mo couldn't leave, and he was going to dance. However, Qin Mo ignored the young and beautiful girl's hand and strode out of the banquet hall. There was an uproar. Qin Mo, the young girl, was disappointed and followed him. What's wrong with you? Qin Mo turned his head and smiled faintly. I have something important to do. Excuse me. At this time, Yi Liangqiu also came over and looked at her son. Mom, I'm going back to the Qin mansion, Qin Mo said in a hoarse voice. Yi Liangqiu had heard that Yihuan had left and went to the Chiu garden. Now that her son was in a hurry to go there, she couldn't tell who he was going to see. She sighed in her heart. These two little ones had really made Master worry to death. This time, Qin Mo had done it on her own accord. She wanted to test the two little ones' minds. Thinking of this, Qin came over and said in a low voice, Mom, look at him. He's lost his soul. But Yihuan is really beautiful now. She's not worse than Aunt Sue, right? Yi Liangqiu looked at Qin's black shirt and black trousers and found it hard to understand Lan Yu's taste. However, she was comforted that Qin was doing well. Yi Liangqiu sighed. Not bad. With that said, he looked at Qin Mu. Chun, look at Qin Mu. He's quite normal. Do you want to change? Oh, that's because Zhou Chongguang is nourished, Qin said indifferently. Yi Liangqiu couldn't help but laugh. Didn't Lan Yu nourish you? Qin held the red wine and smiled. I nourished him. Mom, don't you think Lan Yu is becoming more and more enchanting? Yi Liangqiu. Qin drank the red wine and walked over to dance with the girl on behalf of Qin Mo. Although she was also a girl, the young and beautiful girl from a good family still blushed. She wanted to call Qin her husband. The Qin couple could only sigh at their daughter's behavior. Fortunately, Lan Yu didn't mind. Qin Shen had more rotten peach blossoms than Lan Yu. With this dance, he would definitely come to propose marriage, and they would have to spend a lot of effort to prove that Qin Shen was a woman. What a headache. Qin Anlin and his wife looked at each other. It was his birthday. Did Qin Shen have to steal the limelight like this? Yi Muyan sat on the sofa with Tang Sher. Tang Sher's face was full of admiration. Mr. Yi said calmly, "It's useless to look at her. No matter how beautiful she is, she's still a woman. She can't satisfy you." His little bun was a little dissatisfied. "Yi Muyan, you're getting more and more shameless. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. I heard your parents' conversation when I went downstairs once. You want to be obedient?" Mr. Yi smiled faintly and looked at his little wife. Tang Sher glared at him. "Yi Muyun." He smiled and continued to feed her. Then, he deliberately fed her a few glasses of wine, successfully making her slightly drunk. He liked to see his little wife act like a little girl. She was not that young anymore, but Snow looked especially young, just like a little bird. Actually, he also knew that others would think that he was a pervert, but he didn't care. He just wanted to pamper her like this. When his little wife leaned into his arms, he immediately got up and carried her. He greeted his parents. "Mom, Dad, Cher is drunk. I'll take her upstairs to rest." This rest was commendable. Chapter 43-49. The Qin family was already used to Yi Muyun's evil deeds, especially his parents. They could only sympathize with this little daughter-in-law. Tang Sher should have grown up, but she forced Yi Muyun to become a child. What a bad taste. On the other side, Qin Shen finished a dance and was about to leave. The girl blushed and asked for her WeChat number. Qin Shen raised his eyebrows. Then, after thinking about it, he decided to add it. Another rotten peach blossom. Of course, Lan Yu watched how his wife hooked up with other girls. Should he be proud that he managed to poach Qin Mo's woman? Qin Shen came over and kissed Lan Yu's lips. "Are you angry? What do you think?" Lan Yu wrapped his arms around her waist and nibbled on her lips a few times. He was clearly dissatisfied. Qin Shen smiled and satisfied him to his heart's content. The girl who had just added him on WeChat looked hurt, and tears welled up in her eyes. He was actually Ji. Lan Yu looked at the girl's sad face and sighed. "I've been treated as Ji again." But he quickly pulled himself together. "How are you going to make it up to me tonight?" Qin Shen chuckled. "What do you think?" Lan Yu didn't say anything else. He chuckled and reached out to pinch her face. Actually, his Chunshin was as obedient as a cat at home, even though she was flirtatious outside. The banquet continued, and wouldn't stop just because of Qin Mo's sudden departure. Qin Mo rushed back to the house. The aunt said that He Huan left with Yi Huan for about an hour, and they even left with a small suitcase. Qin Mo frowned. She didn't say where they were going? No, she just said that she was taking Yi Huan out to play for a few days. The aunt said carefully. Although young madam, she wanted to bring Yi Huan, I couldn't stop her. Qin Mo nodded. It's okay. I'll go and find her. After that, he turned around and walked out. When he got in the car, he didn't rush to start the car. Instead, he smoked a cigarette first. In the faint mist of the night, Qin Mo's eyes were somewhat blurred, and his expression was so deep that it was impossible to see clearly. After a long time, he dialed He Huan's number, but her phone was turned off. He frowned and dialed again, but her phone was still switched off, so he sent a WeChat message. Where are you and Yi Huan? I'm coming. Of course, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. Yi Huan didn't even bat an eye at him. Qin Mo held his phone in one hand and held a cigarette in the other. He slowly finished smoking and stubbed out the cigarette before starting the car. He went to Qin Chen's apartment first, but there was no one there. He didn't need to go to his place, as there was definitely no one there. Qin Mo looked for a few places she could have gone, but he couldn't find her. In the middle of the night, he sat in the car, quietly looking at his phone, dialing again and again. Yi Huan's phone was still switched off. Qin Mo didn't want to alarm others, so when his parents called to ask, he said that he was with Yi Huan. However, after hanging up, he was still a little worried. After all, it was very late. Where did the two of them go with their luggage? It wasn't until 3 o'clock in the morning that Qin Mo remembered that he and Juan had bought a villa in B City after their marriage. He rarely went there, but Juan liked it very much. Later, when they divorced, he gave the villa to Juan. The car immediately started, and more than half an hour later, they arrived in front of the villa. In the dark night, the lights in the villa were on, and there was a sense of warmth. Chinemo sat in the car and watched in silence. He seemed to have calmed down. Chapter 4350. His car slowly drove into the courtyard and stopped. He got out of the car, and the guard at the gate came over. President Chin. Chinemo lit a cigarette and looked upstairs. How long has Juan been here? The guard answered honestly. She came here around 10 p.m. Chinemo nodded, walked in slowly, and pressed his fingerprint to open the door. The lights on the first floor were not turned on, and it was very dark. He didn't turn it on, and walked directly upstairs. When he came to the second floor, the light in the corridor on the second floor was dim and hazy, and it was very beautiful. It was also very quiet. He walked over and stopped at the door. Behind the heavy door was his wife and daughter. Of course, Juan was ignoring him now, but Juan was still his child. Chinmo's spirit temporarily won, and he reached out to open the door. The room was full of smoke. In the traditional and gorgeous master bedroom, Juan and Juan were sleeping on the bed. On the big bronze bed, the white silk quilt slid to one side, revealing the two little girls. Juan was wearing one-piece pajamas, cute and round. She was hugging a small pillow with her four limbs, and her soft and chubby face was resting on it, and the pillow sank a lot. On the other side of the big bed, Juan was lying on her stomach, and the pillow was under her little belly. It was obvious that they had a little game before sleeping. Juan's hair was loose, and her black hair was draped over her shoulders. She was wearing a black t-shirt and jeans. She was small and thin, and Chinemo found that Juan seemed to have lost a little weight. He looked at her quietly, thinking about how she looked when she appeared in mint green. So breathtakingly beautiful. And now, she was very cute. It was Juan in his youth. Chinmo's eyes flashed with a touch of desire and tenderness. He bent over and kissed Juan, and then kissed Juan. It was a kiss. Juan had been sleeping soundly the whole time. Slowly, she felt that something was wrong. She opened her eyes and saw his Yuang eyes. Startled, she immediately hugged the pillow and shrunk to the head of the bed. Late at night, he stood in front of the bronze-colored bed in formal attire. He slowly took off his jacket and threw it at the foot of the bed. Then, he carried Juan in his arms. He didn't dare to leave Juan's side, because Juan would be scared in an unfamiliar environment when she woke up. He carried her directly to the sofa. Juan was shocked and angry. She hit his shoulder. "Put me down, Chinemo. What are you doing?" He put her on the sofa. She sat down on it, bounced a little, and stared up at him. Chinemo reached out and gently stroked her little face. "I've been looking for you for half the night." She couldn't stand his jade-like gaze and turned her face away. He moved closer and closer, trapping her between the sofa and himself. His voice was particularly hoarse. "Is there a reward for clearing the game now?" Juan bit her lip. "What reward?" "I don't know." Chinemo smiled lightly, reached out, and carried her up. Then he put her on his lap. If she didn't know what he wanted to do before, it was clear now. She didn't know where his appetite came from. She struggled. Chinemo leaned over and said expressionlessly, "Do you want Juan to watch our live broadcast?" She was furious, but she couldn't do anything about it. He got what he wanted. Juan was so angry that she hit his shoulder, but this would only make Chinemo feel better. He kissed her lips carefully and said hoarsely, "You're so beautiful tonight. Where are your clothes?" Chapter 4351. Juan didn't need to think to know what he was thinking. She snorted and turned her face to the side. "Throw it away." Chinemo didn't care. He could still buy it after throwing it away. He always wanted to hug her in it once. It was always inconvenient with Juan around. Once was enough. Chinemo finally let her go, but he bit her shoulder reluctantly. Juan was bitten by him, but she didn't dare to make a loud noise for fear of disturbing Juan. Chinemo hugged her, feeling a little confused. He kissed her for a long time and said, "Shall I take you to take a bath?" Juan didn't want to talk to him at all. He was so annoying. Chinemo was in a good mood. Although he was a little unsatisfied, he still carried her to the bathroom and served her like he served little Yi Huan. In the end, Yi Huan's face turned red and her breathing was messy. She got up, took the bathrobe and ran away. Chinemo looked at her back and chuckled. Then he took a quick shower himself. Back in the bedroom, Yi Huan and Yi Huan were huddled together under the quilt, only revealing their fluffy little heads. He still had something to say to her, so he dragged her out of the quilt and carried her to the sofa. He wrapped her in the blanket and said, "Why did you run away tonight? Are you jealous?" Yi Huan was a little tired and didn't want to talk to him about this. She laid in his arms and vaguely responded with an No matter what he said, she would respond with an She succeeded in making Chinemo angry. He pinched her little chin and expressionlessly said, "Let's do it again." He was angry, and so was Yi Huan. She suddenly propped herself up, sat aside and flipped her hair. "Do you want to quarrel?" He suppressed his voice and said, "I just want to know what you think." "It's a physiological need. That's what I think," Yi Huan said in a low voice. "Are you satisfied, President Qin?" Chinemo stared at her and said, "I didn't see what those women looked like." Yi Huan felt embarrassed and turned his face away. The appearance of those girls tonight was the biggest embarrassment to him. It didn't mean that he didn't have a choice. Her voice was very soft and somewhat bitter. "Chinemo, if you remarry, I want to take care of Yi Huan by myself. I don't mind not getting married." He was startled. He didn't think that her abnormal behavior tonight was because of this. After a long silence, he asked her, "Are you just worried about Yi Huan? What else? Do I feel sorry for you?" Yi Huan smiled a little miserably. "You don't need them, Chinemo. Everything you have means that you will never lack women." Chinemo sneered. "I'm happy as long as I don't lack women. Are you and Yi Huan not important to me?" "Yi Huan, I really feel like all the love I've had all these years has been fed to the dogs." "Then you can continue to feed the dogs." Yi Huan snorted. Chinemo ground his white teeth. "I really want to bite you to death." Yi Huan ignored him. She bit her lips and didn't speak for a long time. Chinemo stared at her for a while and gritted his teeth again. "How can I like such a cold-hearted woman like you?" In the end, he was unwilling to give up, so he pulled her over and kissed her fiercely. Yi Huan was wrapped in a small blanket and couldn't move at all. She thought that he was going to be rough with her, but he didn't. He just hugged her and said in a hoarse voice, "Let's call it a night. Yi Huan, I also want to have a good rest." Yi Huan was a little surprised and looked up at him. Chinemo closed his eyes and said, "Let's sleep now. I have to go back for a meeting tomorrow." Chapter 43-52. Yi Huan was a little speechless. She was trapped in his arms and couldn't move at all. She couldn't even move a little. After a long time, she finally fell asleep in his arms. Late at night, Chinemo lowered his head and looked at the little thing in his arms. His expression became a little gentle. He reached out and stroked Yi Huan's hair. It felt good and smooth to the touch. She smelled good after the shower. Her little body was nestled in his arms, which made him very satisfied. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. He didn't care if she could hear him, and just said in a hoarse voice, "You're willing to sleep in my arms. Does that mean we've made up?" Of course, Yi Huan couldn't hear him. She just turned around in his arms and changed into a more comfortable position. Her little face happened to be pressed against his chin, which made it convenient for him to kiss her. That night, Chinemo kissed her the whole night as if he was possessed. In the middle of the night, Yi Huan woke up and found that her mama wasn't there. She started to feel a little scared. Then, she found her mama and mama sleeping together on the sofa. Yi Huan opened her big eyes and looked at them eagerly. After a while, she fell down blissfully. Her little limbs hugged the pillow. The baby felt so happy. No matter how much Chinemo liked Yi Huan, he was still pissed off by her the next day. He didn't get a morning kiss, but when he woke up in the morning, she wasn't in his arms, and Yi Huan wasn't there either. He immediately sat up and heard Yi Huan's happy voice coming from downstairs. He knew in his heart that they were still there. He breathed a sigh of relief and grabbed his watch to look at it. It was almost 10 in the morning. Chinemo immediately got up and put on his clothes. He abandoned the jacket he wore last night and went downstairs. Yi-Huan and Yi-Huan were having breakfast. There was no housekeeper here, so Yi-Huan made it. Qin and Mo just went over to take a look and said with disdain, "Is this all you're eating?" When Yi-Huan saw her father coming down, she happily kissed him and said carefully, "The baby likes the food mommy makes." Qin and Mo glanced at Yi-Huan silently and said indifferently, "Yi-Huan has learned to lie at such a young age. She's a little liar just like you." Yi-Huan picked up the vegetable salad with her fork and pouted. "What did I lie to you about?" Qin and Mo had already walked to the kitchen. At that moment, he turned back and said in a low husky voice, "You said you loved me." Yi-Huan rolled her eyes. "I never said that." His gaze deepened, and his voice became a little low. "You said it before, but you forgot." He was always a little disappointed. It was as if he had nowhere to put his feelings for so many years. After last night, he seemed to feel even more empty. Qin and Mo went to make breakfast, both Chinese and Western. Since Yi-Huan was still young, he made breakfast for her that was easy to digest. When Qin and Mo was cutting the ham, he accidentally cut his hand because he was distracted. He was stunned for a moment. He casually found a napkin and cleaned it up. After all, he was a man and different from women. Qin and Mo brought the breakfast over. Although Yi-Huan said she didn't want it, her body was very honest. After all, no one wanted to eat pig's food. Seeing that Yi-Huan was eating happily, Qin and Mo smiled faintly and gave her Yi-Huan's share. Yi-Huan was very happy, but she was worried about her mother's pride, so she only dared to take small bites. Looking at the two unscrupulous little things, Qin and Mo smiled and began to eat. Halfway through, Yi-Huan remembered, "Don't you have a meeting?" Chapter 43:53. He said that in front of Yi-Huan without any scruples. Yi-Huan was furious. Qin and Mo smiled. "Did I say something wrong?" Yi-Huan glanced at Yi-Huan and said in a low voice, "Just once, okay? You're not satisfied just once." He chuckled and said in a particularly hoarse voice, "I can do it tonight. I wasn't in a good state last night, and Yi-Huan," he paused and said, "it's not convenient for me to do it with Yi-Huan." Yi-Huan was speechless. "Qin and Mo, you know that Yi-Huan is here. Can you watch your words?" Qin and Mo looked at Yi-Huan. Yi-Huan was enjoying her food and looked at her father with her big black and bright eyes. "I don't understand. Is Daddy playing a game with Mommy? The kind where you kiss each other and take off your clothes?" Qin and Mo looked at Yi-Huan. Yi-Huan was so embarrassed that she wanted to die. She glared at him and said to Yi-Huan, "Don't listen to your father. He will lead children astray." Qin and Mo glanced at her and asked her lazily, "Have you been led astray by me? After all, you've been with me since you were a child. I don't want to talk to you about this." Yi-Huan snorted. Qin and Mo finished his breakfast and wiped his lips. "I'm going to the company." His movement made Yi-Huan see the wound on his hand, and she stared at it blankly. Qin and Mo also noticed her gaze and smiled. "It's just a small wound. Why? Are you worried?" "I'm not." Yi-Huan looked down and ate the last bit of food. Qin and Mo sighed in a low voice. "You." He went to hug Yi-Huan again before driving away. He didn't say whether he would come back or not. Generally speaking, Yi-Huan should run away with Yi-Huan. After all, they were found by Qin and Mo. However, she didn't run away. Firstly, it was meaningless. Secondly, Yi-Huan was still young, and she really couldn't take good care of her. Although it was embarrassing, it was the truth. This villa was very nice. There were people cleaning it regularly, but there was usually no one to take care of it. Yi-Huan took care of Yi-Huan by herself. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when she was worrying about lunch and wondering if she should order one, a team of chefs from the hotel suddenly came to the villa with fresh ingredients. The moment they entered the kitchen, they started cooking in full swing. Just like that, watching the 5-star chefs cook a Michelin feast, Yi-Huan was so excited that she screamed and clapped her little hands happily. Even Yi-Huan was happy. After all, she was happy when Yi-Huan was happy. The chefs finished the meal and left. There was a bunch of cute flowers on the table, which matched Yi-Huan very well. Yi-Huan ate happily. She was full, and then went to the children's room to sleep. The children's room here was very dreamy, which made Yi-Huan want to stay as a baby. As for Yi-Huan, it was a headache to see the cups and plates on the table, but she still forced herself to wash them. After finishing the work, she was tired and sweaty. Then she took a bath and took a nap. When she woke up, she brought Ihuan out for a walk and bought some groceries. They had their meals outside as well. When she came back with Ihuan, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. Qin and Mo had already arrived home. Ihuan pursed her lips and realized that she shouldn't have used the word home. This was her property. He was simply trespassing. When she said that to him, Qin Mo's eyes became a little meaningful. He leaned over and whispered, "Trespassing? Does it count as trespassing if I hug you? After all, our divorce is not legal." Chapter 43-54. Ihuan glared at him. He was so shameless. His words were particularly picturesque. That kind of picture was really painful to the eyes. Ihuan still glared at him. Ihuan is still here. He raised his eyebrows. Do you think she can understand such profound words? Well, Ihuan couldn't do anything about it. She looked at Ihuan. Ihuan really couldn't understand it either. She looked at them with her big cute eyes. Ihuan felt like a dog in her heart. She reached out and carried the little fellow upstairs to help her wash. There was still a very beautiful big bathtub here. The little fellow looked very happy in it. Ihuan helped her wash while being a little absent-minded. Later, after coaxing Ihuan, she went downstairs. She was surprised to see that Qin and Mo was making dinner. No, it should be a midnight snack. She stopped there and looked at him. It was a candlelight dinner with silver candlesticks and French food. After Qin and Mo was done, he sat there. He was still wearing formal clothes, but his coat was casually thrown away. He looked up at Ihuan and said lightly, "Come and have some with us." Ihuan sat opposite him. She gently held a glass of red wine and gently touched it with her fingers. "Aren't you tired from work? You still made such a sumptuous meal when you came back." Qin and Mo looked at her quietly and said calmly, "It's because I'm tired that I have to eat well." As he said that, he smiled at her warmly. Ihuan felt like a dog in her heart. She still touched the glass of red wine and licked her lips. "Qin and Mo, we are divorced. We have Ihuan to raise, so the way we get along with each other." Qin and Mo ate a piece of steak and looked at her quietly. "So, what do you think? Don't do it." Ihuan didn't say anything. She just stayed silent. After a while she said, "Don't you think there's something wrong between us? Is there a problem?" He stared at her. "We're divorced, but we don't seem to have a partner. So it's reasonable and the safest way for us to make do." He elegantly wiped his lower lip with a napkin. "I don't want to look outside either. It might be a long time before I get married again. I think you do too." Ihuan was infuriated. He was blatantly saying that they were friends on QQ. She glared at him. He smiled. "You can't deny that we're in tune with each other on certain things." Ihuan felt insulted. She turned her head and said in a hoarse voice, "You'll have to remarry eventually." Qin Mo's gaze immediately deepened. He stared at her and said hoarsely, "You know again?" Under that kind of gaze, Ihuan couldn't speak. She could only look at him quietly. Qin and Mo stood up, walked behind her, pressed his hands on her shoulders, and Jun Yin leaned over. "Do you not like me to remarry?" Up to you." Ihuan bit her lip. She wanted to stand up, but she couldn't move at all because he had gently exerted strength on her shoulders and easily restrained her. Ihuan's voice trembled. "Let go of me. You said to let me do whatever I want." Qin and Mo whispered in her ear. "Then I'll do whatever I want to you." Before Ihuan could say anything, he picked her up and walked upstairs. She didn't want to. She pounded his shoulder and said, "Let go of me, Qin and Mo. We're divorced." Chapter 43-55. Ihuan couldn't refute his words. She couldn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, she said in a low voice, "You know it." She was embarrassed. He wanted her whenever he wanted. When he wanted to care for Ai Jia, he didn't care about his feelings. He had principles, but she had no self-esteem. What did he think about love and marriage? Ai Jia was her bottom line. If he didn't back down, Ihuan wouldn't negotiate. When Qin and Mo put her on the big bronze bed in the master bedroom and pressed her with both hands, Ihuan was really angry. She struggled and said, "Qin and Mo, what do you think I am? The woman I want." He stared at her eyes. "Don't say you don't want me." He moved quickly and knew her weakness. He subdued her in a few moves. Because Yi-Hwan wasn't there, he enjoyed himself a few times. When everything calmed down, it was already 2 o'clock in the night. Chin-mo took a shower and came back from the bathroom. He saw Yi-Hwan curled up there. Her small body was covered with a thin quilt, and her little face looked very angry. He smiled, walked over and kissed her. "Weren't you satisfied just now?" Yi-Hwan was so angry that she patted him. "What do you think I am, Chin-mo?" Her reaction was a little fierce. After a pause, he said in a slightly cold voice, "The woman I like, the wife I can remarry." It didn't sound like a proposal. It was more like he was angry. When Yi-Hwan was stunned, he had already left for the children's room. She was lying alone in the huge master bedroom, and on this huge bed. They had just had a good time, but it was very cold. They liked each other, but they couldn't really walk together. She was really afraid that one day, he would suddenly go to Ai Jia, and let Ai Jia put her head on his shoulder again. Yi-Hwan knew herself well. She was a very possessive person, so she couldn't stand it. She was half asleep and half awake. After some time, Chin-mo came back and lay down beside her. She could feel him caressing her face. Yi-Hwan closed her eyes slightly and said in a hoarse voice, "Chin-mo, you know me. I've always been domineering since I was young. If I can't have everything, I'd rather not have it. Don't force me." Chin-mo's body tensed up. After a long time, he said in a low and hoarse voice, "I won't force you. But you can't do it, can you?" Her face rested on his shoulder, as tears slowly fell from the corner of her eyes. This was a rare moment where she was so vulnerable in front of him. Chin-mo's heart softened. He leaned over and kissed her cheek. "Yi-Hwan, don't cry." She couldn't help but cry. She said she wanted to completely separate from him. She said she wanted Yi-Hwan. She said she didn't want to see him again, because he was too hateful. Chin-mo listened to her cry and watched her cry. He felt an indescribable pain in his heart. Finally, he said in a hoarse voice, "I won't see her again. Yi-Hwan, trust me this time." Yi-Hwan shook her head. "No, I don't want you anymore." He would make her feel that she was a naughty child who was acting shamelessly in order to get her favorite candy. And she was indeed acting shamelessly, because she loved him, but she didn't dare to admit it to herself. Chin-mo felt a little funny when he saw her like this. At this time, Yi-Hwan was just like when she was a child. She obviously wanted it, but she was very stubborn. She had always been like this, and she still was now. As for him, he was extremely fond of it. Chin-mo coaxed her. She kept crying. In the end, he had no choice but to kiss her. He kissed her gently. "Okay, I've kissed you. Don't cry, okay?" Chapter 43:56. "I'm yours from now on. I won't run away anymore. I won't see other women. I'll only hug you, okay?" As he spoke, he kissed her little face passionately. But in his heart, he was thinking about how she would look in an evening gown. He wanted to do something, but he was worried about her feelings, so he endured it. He hugged her and said a lot, but he didn't know if she listened. He only felt that time passed very quickly, as if it was dawn the moment he closed his eyes. It was dawn. He opened his eyes and found that Yi-Hwan was already awake. Chin-mo whispered, "Have you thought about what I said last night?" Yi-Hwan stared at him for a while, and after a long time, she slowly sat up. She pursed her lips, and her voice was a little hoarse. "I haven't thought about it yet. Chin-mo, don't force me." The corners of Chin-mo's mouth twitched slightly, and he said bitterly, "When did I force you?" Of course, if he had forced her, she wouldn't have been able to run around today, and he wouldn't have had to chase her everywhere. Yi-Hwan looked at him and smiled faintly. "Aren't you going to the company? I'll take care of Yi-Hwan. 1 or 2 days is fine. But what about in the future?" He stared into her eyes. "You have to shoot films, and you have to go out to work. Don't tell me you'll give up work for Yi-Hwan." "I can," Yi-Hwan said softly. Yi-Hwan said softly, "Chin-mo, you might not understand, but I'm telling you right now, I'm willing to do anything for Yi-Hwan." If that was the case, it was really out of his expectations. Chin-mo looked at her quietly, and after a long time, he said self-deprecatingly, "But it sounds like it's harder for me to be with you. After all, you're ready to take care of Yi-Hwan alone." Yi-Hwan wanted to say something, but her lips moved, and she didn't say a word. If she said it, they were going to fight. In the end, Chin Emo went downstairs first, buttoning his shirt as he took a call from Secretary He. There was something urgent in the company, and he had to deal with it immediately. He took off his tie and went upstairs again. He leaned against the door of the master bedroom. It might be a busy day. Someone will come to cook. He Huan lay on the bed and said gloomily, "Don't let the chef come here anymore. I'm tired of it." "Do you find it annoying after a few times?" Chin Emo chuckled, walked over and bent down. "Why don't I think so?" He Huan blushed and bit her lip. "Chin Emo, don't go too far." He nodded. "Yes, I think so too." After saying that, he kissed her. "I'll ask the auntie to come over and cook for you. It's fine if you skip a meal. Don't forget how old Yi Huan is. She's been living and eating outdoors with you. And you still have the cheek to say that you want to take care of her? What kind of little mother doesn't even know how to cook?" Yi Huan said angrily. "When did I let her sleep in the open? This is a big villa, okay?" Chin Emo bit her cheek. "You're lying." Yi Huan couldn't be bothered with him, and covered her head with the quilt. Chin Emo stared at her, and suddenly dragged her out of the quilt. He used the tie in his hand to tie her up tightly. During the process, Yi Huan was about to go crazy. She glared at him. "Chin Emo, you bastard. If you say it again, I'll be even more of a bastard." He smiled. "I'll untie you when Yi Huan wakes up." Yi Huan was speechless. "She'll sleep until 9 o'clock. What if I want to go to the bathroom?" President Chin smiled. "Then bear with it." After saying that, he looked like he was about to leave. Yi Huan shouted angrily, "Chin Emo, you bastard, let go of me." Chapter 43:57. Chin Emo had already walked to the door. He straightened his sleeves calmly before turning around and saying in a hoarse voice, "Actually, you could have begged me." Yi Huan scolded him. She scolded him harshly, and it was her most vicious word. He wasn't angry and merely listened. "Seems like you're not in a hurry. Just bear with it then." How could Yi Huan bear it? She wanted to go to the washroom right now. She watched as he turned around, as though he was really going to leave. She said hurriedly, I'll beg. Chin Mo's fingers gripped the doorknob. His voice was especially hoarse. "Yi Huan, do you know what I want you to beg for?" She didn't say anything. He turned around and looked at her quietly. "Beg me to be with you." Yi Huan glared at him for a while before collapsing. "I think I won't beg." Seeing her like that, he actually made up his mind and left. Yi Huan was indescribably angry. But no matter how angry she was, he really ran away. In the end, Yi Huan woke up at around 9 o'clock. Yi Huan was in a good mood. Before noon, Auntie Lan came over to make lunch for them. The familiar smell had Yi Huan and Yi Huan so touched that they were about to cry. Auntie Lan had watched Yi Huan grow up, let alone Yi Huan. Thus, she casually mentioned what happened at the banquet that night. She mentioned how Chin Emo had abandoned so many ladies from prestigious families, and that he only had Yi Huan in his heart. Of course, Yi Huan wouldn't take this seriously. If she did, she would lose. During the years when she and Chin Emo were at loggerheads, it wasn't that he didn't have women before. He didn't avoid them either. Perhaps he did it for her to see. She ignored him, and continued to be abroad. Later on, he probably felt bored and quiet again. Regarding this dark history, it wasn't that Yi Huan didn't care about it. She just couldn't bring herself to do it. Actually, her mother was right. In a relationship between a man and a woman, the woman was usually the weaker one. No matter how successful her career was, she was still a woman. Chin Emo could mess around outside when he was angry, but she couldn't. She didn't know if he would be the same when he was angry. Yi Huan thought that perhaps it was because she had been disappointed countless times. So she didn't dare to believe it anymore. An AI Jia had made her disgraced. She had already planned to give up her profession. And last night, he asked her if she loved him. If this did not count, Yi Huan did not know what counted. She was not a person who liked to talk about love. If he didn't understand, she wouldn't explain. Seeing that Yi Huan didn't say anything, Auntie Lan knew that the knot in their hearts hadn't been untied. She didn't say anything, and just continued to take care of them quietly. After dinner, Yi Huan and Yi Huan sat together to watch TV. As they watched, they switched to the entertainment channel. The theme of this episode was actually the column, Don't Tell Him. And the invited guests were Rongyu, AI Mingming, and a famous male actor. He Huan was in the industry, so she immediately understood that AI Mingming had been chosen as the female lead. She was stunned for a moment, then immediately wondered if it was because of Rongyu. However, she knew Chin Emo wasn't someone who would be influenced by others. If Rongyu wanted to use him, he would have to go through him. He had chosen AI Mingming. At this moment, AI Mingming's graceful pose of raising her hand to play with her hair was frozen on the screen. Moreover, the expensive watch on her wrist was quite eye-catching. The host was originally asking professional questions, but at this moment, he went off topic. He asked with great interest, "Miss AI, the watch on your wrist is worth at least $1 million. Did screenwriter Rong give it to you?" Chapter 4358. Yihuan's gaze suddenly froze. She remembered that she had seen this watch before. She did not accept it when Qin Mo gave it to her. The watch on AI Mingming's hand was exactly the same as the one she had seen before. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, AI Mingming flipped her hair and said, "This is a gift from an important person to me, to reward me for a better job." Regardless of whether it was a gift from Qin Mo, He Huan was disgusted. She had said that she was with Rongyu, but now, she was showing off in front of Rongyu. It was not nice. He Huan was worried about Rongyu. Rongyu was a scriptwriter, and had no idea about the chaos in the entertainment industry. Not to mention, AI Mingming was a third-rate celebrity who would do anything just to get ahead. There were so many celebrities like her around. It was a pity for Rongyu. In He Huan's heart, she always hoped that Rongyu could find a good woman to spend the rest of his life with. However, this was Rongyu's private matter, and she would not ask too much about it. What she cared about now was whether the watch was a gift from Qin Mo. Just as He Huan was in a dilemma, AI Mingming's eyes flashed coldly in the live broadcast room. Of course, she knew that the watch on her wrist was trending on Weibo. After all, a watch with millions of views and ambiguous answers would arouse a lot of interest. She was in the entertainment industry and knew how the reporters and the onlookers were. The more she tried to explain, the more people would think that the watch was a gift from Qin Mo. It was not a gift but a gift from her. At some point, when he offered to reward her, she sat in his car and asked for the watch. At that time, there seemed to be a flash of surprise in CEO Qin's eyes. Then he took the box and opened it. After thinking for a moment, he tossed it to her. It was not a gift but an abandonment. She thought that he must have been unhappy, not because of her, but because of the person he wanted to give it to. If she guessed correctly, it was He Huan. But now, as long as it was trending, He Huan would definitely see it. AI Mingming's eyes flashed with a sneer. Rongyu? Rongyu was just a stepping stone. Nothing happened that night. All she did was smear some blood on the bedsheets, and that fool believed her. Of course, Rongyu was talented and had a bright future. But compared to the temptation, she felt that Rongyu wasn't her best choice. She wanted to climb up the tree that was Qin Mo. As long as there was precious blood flowing in her body, she would always be able to rise to the top. One day, she would stand at the peak of the entertainment industry. Didn't He Huan look down on her? She wanted to show He Huan that she, who had been criticized and despised by her for having no acting skills, and could only be the second or third female lead, could also be the female lead. As long as this kind of blood flowed in her body, Qin Mo would support her. AI Mingming smiled gently. This blood was really good. He Huan had been abroad for so many years, and she had never fulfilled her duties as a mother. She had no idea how lonely President Qin was. No matter how much love he had, it would wear away. However, she really didn't expect that AI Jiao would not be able to win over Qin Mo. AI Jiao was a scheming person, but he pretended to be pitiful and sick, and he still couldn't win over him. It was really a pity that He Huan sent him abroad. In fact, He Huan would never know her position in Qin Mo's heart. She had everything that other women wanted, but she never cherished it. Qin Mo loved her so much that he wouldn't let her go even if it was a drop of blood. Not only did he not let her go, but he also let her fly so high and so far. They were both human, but how could they be so different? Chapter 4359. Indeed, just as AI Ming Ming had expected, the watch on her wrist became a trending topic. The focus of the gossip was undoubtedly on which sugar daddy had bought it. After about an hour, information about Qin Mo, the president of King Entertainment, buying the watch was leaked. In an instant, hashtag Qin Mo, hashtag Qin Mo's divorce, hashtag Qin Mo and Rongyu's relationship, and even hashtag Qin Mo's ex-wife were all trending. The most unbelievable thing was that some netizens had a wild imagination, saying that the person Qin Mo liked wasn't He Huan or AI Ming Ming, but Rongyu. Hence, hashtag Qin Mo and Rongyu were directly exposed. They looked similar. One had a strong aura, and the other had a gentle aura. When they were in the same frame, they looked especially harmonious. The public relations department of King Entertainment didn't know how to deal with this news. Were they supposed to hold a press conference and announce that their boss didn't like men and was straight? Qin Mo was in an important meeting at the office. Secretary He came over a few times hesitating. "What's the matter, Secretary He?" Qin Mo finally noticed her expression and asked softly. Secretary He thought for a moment and said softly, "President Qin, you're trending again." Qin Mo looked at her. Secretary He passed the phone to him, and he only took a glance. "What's wrong with this AI Ming Ming?" Secretary He rolled her eyes. President Qin was the one who picked the watch. Even if He Huan didn't want it, he couldn't have given it to another woman. Although it had nothing to do with him, it was better to avoid suspicion. "President Qin, you're going to be single forever." Secretary He thought to herself. That person in President Qin's family has always had a childish temper. He's not easy to talk to. Now that he's got a solid piece of evidence, who knows what he'll do? She sympathized with him, but also felt that he deserved it. Qin Mo put down the phone and instructed, "Just keep it at the top of the trending list. Take everything else down." Secretary He thought to herself, is President Qin trying to sell himself? Has King Entertainment reached this stage? She followed Qin Mo's instructions. Although she knew it was for the sake of the movie, it was still a little too much. After Secretary He left, Qin Mo continued with the meeting. Although it was a trivial matter, he thought He Huan would mind. And he didn't mind making her mind. Qin Mo didn't call He Huan to explain. Anyway, she must be thinking about how to cut off all ties with him. They grew up together, so he was well aware of her temper. After the meeting, he walked to the office and told Secretary He, "Get AI Ming Ming to see me." Secretary He knew that even if AI Ming Ming didn't die, she would lose a layer of skin. This girl was really bold and scheming. She actually wanted to use CEO Qin to stir up a scandal. Was CEO Qin so easily manipulated? What's more, if you heat up the food, the company will freeze it. Whatever you say will be useless. What fans were best I was forgetting. With that in mind, Secretary He contacted AI Ming Ming's manager. "Tell AI Ming Ming to go to President Qin's office immediately. Be careful with your eyes. President Qin is very unhappy. Yeah, your artist is too daring. President Qin is married. Divorce? Are you kidding me? Does a C-list artist have the right to interfere with President Qin's divorce? It's enough for you to say this to me. If President Qin hears about it, I won't be able to protect you." She didn't know what the other side said, but Secretary He hung up. She walked to Qin Mo's office. "President Qin." Qin Mo was deep in thought. After a while he looked up. "Get me another watch." Huh. Secretary He didn't understand. Was it for He Huan? Was it an apology or a lie? Qin Mo knew she was thinking too much. He said calmly, "Get AI Ming Ming to tell the world that she's wearing a high-quality imitation." She wanted to chat with like-minded people about new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. On WeChat she followed Yuta literature. Talk about life and find a confidant. Chapter 4360. When Secretary He heard that, he cursed in his heart. Wasn't President Qin being too casual? This was $1 million watch, yet it was an imitation. The rich were too capricious. After Secretary He left, AI Ming Ming came over. She saw that Qin Mo was still as obedient as a cat. Although she had precious blood, others could have it too. She wasn't irreplaceable. She had to make President Qin think that she was obedient, easy to control, and not greedy. AI Ming Ming walked beside Qin Mo, her voice trembling. President Qin, you were looking for me? Qin Mo sat behind the office chair. He didn't say anything, just flipping through the documents. Since he didn't say anything, AI Ming Ming didn't dare to make a sound or sit down. She could only stand there and wait. For a third-rate star like her, although she seemed to be glorious at times, in the face of capital, sometimes she wasn't even a plaything. Especially a man like Qin Mo, who didn't like women in the entertainment industry. She heard that the men in the Qin family liked to raise women from young. The famous Yi Muyan was like that, and so was President Qin. Yi Huan was brought up by him, but that woman didn't appreciate it. As AI Ming Ming thought about it, Qin Mo finally looked up and quietly looked at the girl in front of him. AI Ming Ming had been specially approved by him to enter the company. In fact, her looks and acting skills were really average, but she had a very important specialty that made Qin Mo keep her. She had panda blood. Yi Huan and Yi Huan too. Especially Yi Huan, she couldn't stop herself from just touching her. It wasn't a big problem, and she would get better when she grew up. However, Yi Huan wasn't by her side, so AI Ming Ming was a moving blood source. AI Ming Ming even had to donate a certain amount of her blood every month and store it in the hospital's blood bank. That watch, firstly, was because he was angry at Yi Huan, and secondly, AI Ming Ming had made a request, so he gave it to her casually like before. However, he seemed to have underestimated her ambition. Her actions were clearly a provocation to Yi Huan. This made Qin Mo unhappy. If Qin Mo was unhappy, AI Ming Ming's days would not be easy. The longer Qin Mo remained silent, the more uneasy AI Ming Ming felt. However, she did not dare to speak. Finally, Qin Mo covered the golden pen in his hand and looked up at the person in front of him. He lowered his voice and said, "Do you know where my bottom line is? Before this, I thought you were very smart, so I would agree to any unreasonable request. However, I didn't expect you to provoke Yi Huan." AI Ming Ming's voice trembled. President Qin, I didn't mean it. I didn't expect the consequences to be like this. I was just a little vain. I definitely didn't mean anything else. Qin Mo looked at her quietly for a while. Suddenly, he took out a document and threw it in front of her. There are dozens of people in B City who have panda blood who can draw for Yi Huan alone. One more won't make a difference and neither will you. Behave yourself. Also, Secretary, he should have told you what you should do next. AI Ming Ming sniffled. Secretary, he did. But President Qin, if I do this, my career as a star will be over. What will others think of me? Also, the movies I shoot later will affect the box office. Qin Mo was still staring at her, and then he sneered. You're smart. You know how to use this as an excuse. AI Ming Ming looked at him and waited quietly. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. WeChat followed you to literature. Talking about life, looking for bosom friends. Chapter 4361. Qin Mo said slowly. If I fall out with Yi Huan because of this, do you think this movie will still exist? I don't care how you hype it up to save your image, but you should know your limits. You can't afford to involve people you shouldn't, or it won't be as simple as disappearing from the industry. After he said that, AI Ming Ming broke out in a cold sweat. Only then did she realize what she had done wrong. Yi Huan was her bottom line that she could not cross. She didn't want to give up the glory and wealth she had. She was about to become famous, and she couldn't give up anything. Hence, she lowered her stance and pleaded, President Qin, I know I was wrong. I will do as you say. I will say it's an imitation, and I can explain it to Director He. Qin Mo said it wasn't necessary, because a person of her status didn't deserve it. AI Ming Ming wanted to cry, but she didn't dare. Only a person like Yi Huan had the right to cry in front of President Qin. If she cried, she wouldn't even have the right to donate blood. AI Ming Ming ran out. Secretary He saw her at the door, and knew it wasn't good. She knew that President Qin wouldn't be nice to her, but she couldn't blame President Qin. Of all people to provoke, he had to provoke Yi Huan. Secretary He went in. Qin Mo was looking at a document. In a calm voice he said, pick 3 out of these dozens of people. Negotiate with them to let them work at King Entertainment. They must have the blood of a young girl. He couldn't tolerate his Yi-Huan being transfused with the blood of a man who had dug his feet out. She didn't want it no matter how healthy she was. Secretary he was speechless at Qin Mo's conditions, but she still tried her best to satisfy her boss's request. But there was one thing she asked carefully. What about AI Meng Meng? Qin Mo just glanced at her and said calmly, her blood won't be used in the future. There was still 500 liters of blood in the blood bank. It wouldn't be used in the near future, and there would be new blood soon. Secretary he understood Qin Mo's words. AI Meng Meng was finished. Don't tell her, was probably going to be cancelled. President Qin was capricious, but he could afford it. Actually, in recent years, King Entertainment had always been taking the commercial route. Several commercial blockbusters have been selling well, and their stock prices had risen delightfully. Even though Starlight Entertainment had also risen, King Entertainment was still the big brother in the entertainment industry. There was no doubt about that. Secretary he quickly left. Qin Mo looked at the closed door and felt a headache coming on. Yi-Huan was still a fool, and that watch was indeed given by him. He placed his hand on his forehead and thought for a while. In the end, he decided not to think about anything else. While he was troubled, AI Meng Meng, who had just left, was even more troubled. She had a feeling that she was done for. Although President Qin did not say that she would be replaced as the female lead, President Qin was undoubtedly very angry. And that name list, just thinking about it made her hair stand on end. She was too stupid to think that she could surpass Yi-Huan. However, she did not know that when she returned home, there would be even more terrifying things waiting for her. AI Jiao was waiting for her. AI Meng Meng looked at the small apartment. AI Jiao was sitting on the sofa, and there were two huge men standing behind him. She felt a wave of fear. She said in a small voice, "Sister, why are you here?" Yes, AI Jiao was her sister. They had the same father and mother. But her sister had been adopted by an American couple when she was young, and had been living a luxurious life. She, on the other hand, had grown up in the mud and had no idea what America was like. Chapter 4362. But one day AI Jia appeared. He bought her a lot of beautiful clothes, and asked her if she wanted to go to B City. In AI Meng Meng's impression of B City, she had only seen it on television. It was so prosperous and beautiful. Of course, AI Meng Meng was willing to go. She went to King Entertainment, and everything was like a dream. Except for the blood, everything was perfect. But later, she realized that it was also perfect. Every time her blood was drawn, she would get a sum of money. Sometimes it was 100,000, and sometimes it was 200,000. At first, she didn't know who it was, but later she found out that it was President Qin's daughter, who needed her blood. President Qin was a big shot, and she couldn't see him until she was brought to the hospital in the middle of the night. That was the first time AI Meng Meng saw Qin Mo. He was different from what others said. He was carrying Qin Yi-Huan, and his expression was gentle and not fierce at all. AI Meng Meng was still in a daze when she was grabbed by the nurse to draw 300 of her blood. That day was actually her period, and she fainted after the blood was drawn. When she woke up, she saw the handsome face that she had only met once. She called him President Qin. Qin Mo only left a few words. "You've worked hard." He left and his secretary stayed to take care of her. In the end, he said that President Qin was willing to fulfill one of her wishes. At that time, AI Meng Meng only dared to ask for a small role. She was very satisfied and thought that she would become famous. But she soon realized that it was just a dream. If she didn't have someone to support her in the entertainment industry, she would be drowned out. She couldn't accept it, and so she did many things, including injuring that little girl, so that she could give her blood to that little girl. AI Meng Meng snapped out of her memories and bit her lip. "Sister, why are you back? Weren't you in America?" AI Jia slowly got up from the sofa and walked to AI Meng Meng. She leaned in and chuckled. "I wouldn't know what you did if I didn't come back, right? Sister?" AI Meng Meng was obviously afraid of her, and she cried out. AI Jia, on the other hand, sneered. "The watch in your hand is not bad." As he spoke, he pinched AI Meng Meng's fair arm and lifted it up to look at it. AI Ming Ming wanted to break free, but AI Jia's strength was shockingly strong. She could only cry out in pain and ask AI Jia to let go. AI Jia's smile became even colder. My dear sister, are you thinking that I'm so useless that I can't even deal with a man? Are you going to do it yourself? AI Ming Ming's face turned pale as she denied. No, sister, I really didn't. Seeing that AI Jia was unmoved, she begged again. Sister, how could I dare to touch your things? I don't even dare to do it. Can you believe me? AI Jia's expression was a little strange. She let go of AI Ming Ming, but her gaze did not relax at all. She walked around AI Ming Ming, but AI Ming Ming did not dare to move. AI Jia said, You don't dare? Why wouldn't you dare? Qin Huan's injuries were all accidents? AI Ming Ming was so scared that her face turned pale. Sister, I didn't do it. I didn't. However, AI Jia's gaze was extremely sharp. She lowered her voice and choked a little. I only got a small injury. It's nothing. What else? AI Jia said coldly. The female lead of this movie was originally mine. Although I can't act in it, it's in your hands now. Didn't you do anything? Didn't you just say that you wouldn't fight with me for it? Chapter 4363. AI Ming Ming begged pitifully. Sis, I know I was wrong. I just wanted to be the female lead this once. The female lead will always be me. AI Jia's eyes flashed fiercely. You're from the countryside, and you want to be the female lead? AI Ming Ming was stunned and hurt. After a long while she whispered, Sis, we have the same parents. As soon as she said that, she was slapped on the face. It was so hard that she almost lost her hearing. AI Jia's expression turned even uglier. She squinted her beautiful eyes and said, If you say something like that again, I'll break your legs. Do you hear me? AI Jia hated it when people talked about her background the most, especially when they talked about her younger sister, who knew her very well. She did not help her younger sister to hurt herself. She wanted her to be a spy. How could she have known that her own sister would dig her own corner? How could AI Jia tolerate that? She pulled AI Ming Ming's hair and messed it up before she felt a little better. This is how you should be. Remember, everything you have today was given to you by me. You must be obedient. AI Ming Ming had been holding it in. AI Ming Ming had been holding it in. She was also afraid of AI Jia. But she was a human and she had emotions too. When her temper flared up, she retorted, Am I not obedient enough? Also, everything I have today was exchanged with my blood. Where were you when I fainted after my blood was drawn? You could have given me everything, but you defiled me like this. Do you really treat me as your little sister? AI Ming Ming was speechless. After she said that, AI Jia looked at her expressionlessly for a while before she chuckled softly. You dare to resist? You've grown up and your wings have hardened, haven't you? She laughed coldly. If I hadn't brought you out, you might have given birth to a few children for some dirty man. You don't even have a decent set of clothes. You must have forgotten how you used to look like. Do you want me to remind you who you had sex with before you came? Don't mention it. AI Ming Ming's voice was filled with fear. That night was her nightmare. AI Jia, on the other hand, was enjoying the look on her face. After a while she said, Do you know who hired Lu Erju? AI Ming Ming's eyes were wide open and filled with tears. She looked at the woman she had once treated as her own sister in disbelief. She was so noble and gentle. Everything was fake. I don't believe it. I don't believe you would do this to me. Why? AI Ming Ming seemed to have run out of tears as she asked with all her might. She couldn't stand it. She did not believe that her sister would do this to her. AI Jia chuckled. You're not that valuable after losing your first time. What if you climb into Qin Mo's bed, and you're still a virgin? I have to be prepared, don't I? AI Ming Ming trembled all over. I've never dared to think about President Qin. I just want to have a career. I just want to be a star. You are only fit to be a whore. AI Jia gave him another slap. His voice was cold. You don't deserve anything. You only deserve to be drained of your blood. You're so stupid. You played your cards so badly. I can't even bear with you. AI Ming Ming stared at the woman in front of her and suddenly laughed. She laughed so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. She said, AI Jia, you have everything. You have so much money and the title of a movie queen. But are you living a comfortable life? Are you happy? I don't think you're happy. You're always thinking about President Qin. You just want him to be your substitute, right? Stop dreaming. You and I are actually the same. Yes, I was born in the mountains. Don't forget that you are too. You're just as cheap as me. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. She followed Yuta literature on WeChat, talking about life and looking for bosom friends. Chapter 4364. But as soon as she finished speaking, AI Jia slapped her. This time, AI Mingming's face was slapped to the side. Blood even seeped out from the corner of her mouth. AI Jia reached out and pushed her onto the sofa. She lowered her head and leaned over, saying in a cold voice, "You said I'm cheap. Mingming, I'll show you what it means to be cheap. I'll show you what it means to live like a lowly dog." AI Mingming looked at the beautiful woman in front of her with fear in her eyes. She used to worship and love this sister. She was the one who brought her everything. She was the one who gave her hope. But now AI Mingming looked at AI Jia. She had a feeling that AI Jia would do something cruel to her. Sure enough, AI Jia straightened his body in front of her and looked at her arrogantly. He reached out and pinched her chin. His voice was very soft. "Aren't you the most arrogant one? You think that your blood is great. You think that with blood, you can get everything." AI Mingming stared at her. "What do you want? I'm your sister. You can't do that to me." "Sister?" AI Jia sneered. "I don't have such a lowly sister. Look at your skin. Look at your rustic aura. How do you look like my sister?" AI Mingming's eyes were filled with fear. She moved her body to the side with all her might. But the 2 strong men in black behind her immediately pressed her shoulders to stop her from moving. AI Mingming screamed, "What are you doing?" AI Jia took out a syringe from her handbag calmly. Her voice was also very calm. "I heard that people who take this stuff can't donate blood anymore. So, I'll give you a shot. As for whether or not you'll get addicted, it's up to fate." AI Mingming looked at the transparent syringe and the silver needle that was emitting a cold light. She tried her best to move back. She was extremely afraid. She knew what it was, and she could not believe that this woman was actually so heartless. They were blood-related relatives. Sister, I know I was wrong. Can you let me go?" AI Mingming struggled with all her might. She also moved with all her might. She was extremely afraid that if the needle went in, her life would be over. It didn't matter if she didn't continue to draw blood, but if she was infected, she wouldn't be able to survive in the entertainment industry. The industry was very dark, but the higher-ups and the public had zero tolerance. Her forehead was covered in sweat, and her eyes were filled with tears. She begged AI Jia to let her go. However, AI Jia was unmoved. Her face was still as cold as ever, and there was a strange smile on her face. The long needle pierced into her skin. AI Mingming struggled with all her might. Her eyes were unfocused, but she could not break free. She could only watch helplessly as she fell into despair. AI Mingming didn't know when AI Jia had left, but she vaguely remembered that AI Jia had told her to be obedient. Be obedient? Would she still be disobedient? She was done for. What was the point of being obedient? Were people really different from each other? Why was her heart so cruel? What did she do wrong? Very soon, AI Mingming lost consciousness. Later, she didn't know who sent her to the hospital. Then, they found traces of 1D in her blood. Then, they did a deep examination to confirm it. For a moment, AI Mingming, a third-rate celebrity, had become a A-list celebrity because of that watch. Now she had fallen off again. She didn't even have the chance to clarify that the watch was an imitation, because the public was most concerned about her sucking that thing. I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1. Husband, addicted to pampering. Talking about life. Looking for a bosom friend. Chapter 4365. She knew that her exit from the entertainment industry was a definite thing. It was just that she wasn't sure how it would affect the company and the new film. She, on the other hand, had to wait for Qin and Mo to deal with her matter. AI Mingming wasn't trying to flatter herself, but she knew that her matter would have a huge impact on King Entertainment. She knew what would happen to her. She had nothing left. Her reputation, her career, her female lead, it was all gone. And all of this was done by AI Jia, her own sister, the person who had once given her dreams. It wasn't Qin Mo that AI Mingming waited for in the hospital. It was Secretary He. Secretary He's expression was solemn. AI Mingming immediately sat up when she saw him. Her face was as yellow as wax and her body was weak. Her first words were, "I was forced." Secretary He walked over and sat on the chair beside the bed. He paused for a moment before saying, "I think you're not a foolish person. Your blood, you won't ruin your future." AI Mingming didn't have any makeup on. Her skin was yellow, and she was wearing a hospital gown. She looked like someone who had just come out from the mountains. Her eyes widened and her voice was hoarse. "Secretary He, you have to believe me. I really didn't drink it. I cherish my feathers so much. Why would I do something like that?" Secretary He stared at her for a long time. "Who called you? Can you tell President Qin?" AI Mingming's eyes widened even more. She wanted to say it, but she didn't dare to even if she had 10 guts. If she said it out loud, AI Jia would kill her next time. She had to live. She couldn't die. If she wanted to live, she couldn't say anything about that crazy AI Jia. AI Mingming shook her head, and then lowered her head. "I was tricked during a social event." Secretary He's gaze deepened. He took out a stack of documents and placed it in front of AI Mingming. His voice was low. "This is the information President Qin just got. It's about the harm you've done to Yihuan these few years. You know how important Yihuan is to President Qin. President Qin doesn't want to see you again. AI Mingming, you're on your own now." With that, Secretary He got up to leave. There was nothing more to say. AI Mingming looked down at the documents. She knew who had done it, but she couldn't say it. Even though she was in such a sorry state, she still couldn't say it. But she stopped Secretary He. Secretary He turned around. AI Mingming pulled off the 4 on her hand. Fresh blood flowed down her wrist. Her precious blood was now worthless. AI Mingming's blood flowed down. Secretary He sighed in his heart. Actually, when AI Mingming first entered the company, she was pretty and lively. She seemed to like Yihuan a lot, saying that Yihuan was very cute, and even wanted to hug Yihuan. Of course, this was not allowed. Later, she changed, but she didn't expect that she would become so crazy. In order to exchange her blood for opportunities and conditions, she heard Yihuan again and again. Fortunately, Yihuan was fine now. Otherwise, President Qin would chop her into pieces. Secretary He said in a low voice. "On account of the past, President Qin won't sue you or put you in jail. It's just that you can't stay in the company anymore." AI Mingming. This is already President Qin's greatest kindness. It's Yihuan who said that Miss Mingming is really good. He even bought her sweets, coaxed her to sleep, coaxed her not to cry. As Secretary He spoke, AI Mingming couldn't help but cry. "I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1. Husband, addicted to pampering. Follow you read literature on WeChat chatting about life. And looking for a bosom friend." Chapter 4366. As Secretary He spoke, AI Mingming couldn't help but cry. She was so bad, hurting Yihuan again and again. But Yihuan was like a little angel. Secretary He whispered again. This was Yihuan's idea. She said she wouldn't pursue the matter. "Yihuan." AI Mingming was stunned. "She doesn't hate me?" Secretary He paused and smiled faintly. "I don't think it's hate. Most importantly, you still have to thank Yihuan. Children were like angels on earth. They only had gratitude in their hearts." Secretary He left for real this time. After she left, AI Mingming covered her face and cried bitterly. She really hadn't expected this day. In her imagination, the person who would deal with her in the end would be Yihuan. But no, the person who hurt her was her own sister, AI Jia. AI Mingming squatted at the foot of the bed and cried bitterly. When the nurse came to change her dressing, she was shocked. She pulled her up and placed her on the bed to reconnect the drip. The leader of the morning shift was an old nurse. As she busied herself with her work, she scolded. "It's not a big deal. You'll be fine once you get through it. It's not as bad as this. You can't eat anywhere with your hands. You should at least have some savings." AI Mingming widened her eyes and murmured, I don't dare to think about the future. The reporters outside the hospital, and the public waiting for her to apologize. All of this scared her. But she knew it wasn't as scary as AI Jia. After what happened last night, what was there to be afraid of? AI Mingming closed her eyes, her frail body trembling. She had no way out. She didn't want to go back to the ravine. She didn't want to become AI Jia's pawn. If she listened to her again, she would be too stupid. She knew AI Jia wanted her to hate He Huan and Qin Emo. But AI Jia was the one who brought this to her. AI Mingming was vain and a little scheming. But she still had a little humanity. She curled up in the hospital alone for a few days. During this time, King Entertainment sent people to guard the hospital. She knew deep down that they were waiting for her to apologize and explain herself. But these few days of peace were enough for her. She was very grateful. She was grateful to the Qin family for not sending her to prison. She was especially grateful to that child. On the day AI Mingming was discharged from the hospital, she went through a special passageway. Her personal assistant came to pick her up. She did not say anything and just sent her home. AI Mingming sat in the car and said softly, "I want to stay in a hotel." To her, that apartment was a nightmare. She never wanted to go back, but she had to take her luggage. In the end, her assistant went back with her to pack up. There weren't many things, mainly clothes. After tidying up, AI Mingming said in a low voice, "This is the apartment the company rented for me. Also, thank you, Sister Xiaohong, for taking care of me during this period of time. Thank you." She used to be a little arrogant, always thinking that she had a different kind of blood in her, that she was something great, and looked down on others. But now she knew that when it was necessary, she had nothing. Little Red's expression softened. She hesitated for a moment before patting her on the shoulder. "If you need it, I can introduce you to a job, but it won't be very glamorous. The salary is just a few thousand yuan. If you need it, call me. But you can't touch that thing anymore." There were tears in AI Mingming's eyes. "I didn't do it willingly." Chapter 4367. I believe you. Sister Xiaohong sighed. Of course you wouldn't touch it since you love beauty so much. But sometimes this circle was just so dark. Little girl, you must have offended someone. Sister Xiaohong didn't say much, nor did she ask any more questions. She helped her settle down in the hotel, as a token of her appreciation, and left. AI Mingming sat alone in the hotel room for a while before picking up her phone to call Qin Mo. In a choked voice, she said that she wanted to hold a press conference. Qin Mo was very cold, and said he would leave it to Secretary He. He didn't say anything else. After AI Mingming put down the phone, she burst into tears again. She knew she had brought this on herself. But she also vaguely knew that AI Jia wouldn't let her get better. Because in AI Jia's eyes, she had lowly blood flowing in her. She didn't deserve to be famous, didn't deserve to live a superior life. How ironic. She was her own sister. On the day of AI Mingming's press conference, she really enjoyed the treatment of an A-list celebrity. All the media gathered together, waiting for the photos and the latest press release. Qin Mo himself was traffic, and traffic was the way of the king. AI Mingming was dressed in a white shirt and black dress. Her face was plain and clean. She went on stage with the help of King Entertainment's staff. She didn't read from a script. Her gaze was pale, and she looked at the audience with some reluctance. This might be her last time standing in front of people. Although it wasn't glorious, she still felt nostalgic. She had wanted to be a celebrity since she was young. She held the microphone with one hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Today, there are two things I want to clarify. First, the watch I mentioned before was actually a counterfeit. There is no big shop behind it. If there is, it is the company that has always supported me." As she spoke, she bowed. After straightening up, she calmed herself down and continued. "The other thing is that I was rushed to the hospital this time. I promised to the public that I'm not a gentleman, but this kind of bad behavior is a disgrace, so I've decided to leave the entertainment industry forever. I'm sorry to the public, and to all my fans who like me. I've let you down, so I'm sorry again." As she said that, her eyes were filled with tears. Her eyes and nose were red. At this time, a reporter had already asked a tricky question. "Miss AI, Is this your best performance in your career? Do you want to be forgiven for showing weakness? AI Ming Ming was dazed for a moment before she snapped out of it and retorted. No, I'm leaving the industry forever. I will be responsible to society and the public, and will not enter the entertainment industry again. In the end, she said a few words, but the reporters didn't know what to write. They didn't think she was that bad after all. Another sighed. It's a pity for such a good seedling. If she had chosen the artistic route from the start, she wouldn't have been nominated for an international award. Qin Mo held a glass of red wine in his hand. Did you find out who gave her the injection? Secretary, he shook his head. I didn't find anything. The other party was very careful. AI Ming Ming also refused to say anything. I think she probably offended someone in the industry. Otherwise, how could she be so ruthless? Qin Mo lowered his eyes. Let her be. Those words meant that the matter was over. Qin Mo didn't expect that Yi Huan's kindness and cuteness had saved AI Ming Ming, and Yi Huan herself. Chapter 4368. After Secretary he left, Qin Mo held the glass in his hand and swirled it gently. After a long time, he drank the wine in his glass and dialed Yi Huan's number. Her phone was still turned off. He smiled bitterly. This time she was really angry, but he felt wronged. She was the one who didn't want it. He gave it away and she was unhappy. Didn't she say it was an imitation now? He lied to himself. But women still needed to be coaxed. Qin Mo put down his glass and walked out. Before he left, he bumped into someone he shouldn't have bumped into. AI Jia. AI Jia walked out of the guest room and looked at Qin Mo. Long time no see. Qin Mo looked at her quietly and said calmly, Why are you here? I heard something happened to King Entertainment, so I came to see if there's anything I can help with. AI Jia smiled. Qin Mo's lips curled up. You're quite well informed, but there's nothing to help with. Oh right, let Secretary he entertain you. As he said that, he called for Secretary he. Secretary he came over and looked at the two of them. It was a little difficult. Actually, she knew that AI Jia was a difficult person to deal with. If a normal woman knew that she had caused discord in the other party's family, she would definitely avoid it. But this one, not only did she not avoid it, she even came over. AI Jia was obviously unhappy. She was here to talk about the movie. AI Ming Ming couldn't act, but she could. She wanted to say it, but Secretary he said shrewdly. Miss AI, our President Qin has something to do. Why don't you come over to my place for some tea and snacks? Qin Mo. Is there only a secretary's hospitality left between us? AI Jia's voice was also moving. Secretary he exclaimed in her heart that it was good acting. But she was more inclined to AI Ming Ming's lesbian acting skills. Not bad, she was sincere. Even though she had done bad things, she looked more natural now. Qin Mo was obviously impatient. He frowned. AI Jia, I told you. AI Jia's voice had a touch of desolation. Are you going to ignore me like he did? Qin Mo looked at Secretary he. Get the company's doctor to give Miss AI a shot of Valium. Secretary he immediately went to make the call. AI Jia's expression was a little angry. Qin Mo, Qin Lu died for you. Yes. Qin Mo's voice was heavy and pained. But he is my family, and the ones who hurt the most are my parents, not you or me. AI Jia, don't use the land of Qin incident to kidnap anyone. He was tired of it too. AI Jia smiled strangely. She took a step back and said, Qin Lu, you will regret this. After saying that, she quickly left. And Qin Mo noticed that she called Qin Lu's name, not him. Qin Mo stood there for a while. Secretary he came over and watched AI Jia leave. She stuck out her tongue and said, he left. Qin Mo's gaze was deep. In the future, tell the security guards not to let anyone in. Secretary he thought to himself, did they have a complete falling out? But it was good. It was better to stay away from such a woman with bad intentions and princess syndrome. Qin Mo went downstairs and got into the car. To the villa. He hadn't seen Yi Huan for a few days. This girl sealed the door and didn't let Auntie Lan open it for him. She was really stubborn, but it seemed like he could still tolerate it. Also, this could be considered jealousy, right? Chapter 4369. The car arrived at the villa and stopped at the entrance. The driver opened the door for Chin Mo. President Chin, you can't get in. Chin Mo held his coat in his hand and looked at the villa for a while before saying to the driver, "Go back first. I'll call you when I need the car." The driver was quite enthusiastic today. "President Chin, are you going to climb the wall? Can you do it? Do you want me to give you a hand?" Chin Mo. He glared at the driver, and the driver immediately got into the car. He didn't dare to look at President Chin climbing the wall. Chin Mo glared at him fiercely again, before walking to the security room. This young security guard was also He Huan's man. If he said that he wouldn't open the door, then he wouldn't open the door. He even said that it wouldn't have anything to do with him if he bumped into him. Chin Mo's voice was indifferent. "Turn off the current." The security guard was in a difficult position. Chin Mo repeated himself, and he could only do as he was told. Chin Mo walked to the wall and picked a place to climb over. When he landed in the courtyard, he heard a sharp intake of breath. Looking over, he saw that it was Yi Huan. Little Chin Yi Huan was digging with a small bucket and a small shovel. He was about to dig his father's grave. Her little mouth was slightly open, and she looked very cute. Chin Mo patted the soil on his body and coughed. "Where's Mommy? Mommy is taking a nap. Grandma Lan is cooking. Mommy will wake up when the food is ready. The baby thinks that Mommy must have smelled the food. Grandma Lan's food smells so good." The corner of Chin Mo's mouth twitched. He carried Yi Huan to the kitchen and handed her to Auntie Lan. "Wash the little one. I'm going to check on Yi Huan." Auntie Lan smiled when she saw him. She looked over and asked, "Did you climb over the wall?" Chin Mo's gaze was a little strange. Yi Huan smiled and said, "Daddy fell from the sky." Chin Mo pinched her little face. "You're so naughty. You learned it from your mother." When he was about to leave, Yi Huan hugged his leg. "Daddy only likes Mommy, not baby." Auntie Lan smiled. "Why don't you give her a hug? She missed you a lot too." Chin Mo's face was a little hot. This kind of emotion would only appear in front of an elder. He coaxed Yi Huan, and little Yi Huan actually felt embarrassed. She twisted her little body and wanted to play by herself. Chin Mo smiled and let go of her. He watched as the little fellow ran off to dig the soil with a small bucket and a small shovel. Chin Mo shook his head and said to Auntie Lan, "Yi Huan spoils her too much. She doesn't even go to school anymore." Auntie Lan swiftly processed the ingredients and smiled. "Aren't you indulging Yi Huan as well?" Chin Mo smiled and didn't say anything. "I'll go up and see Yi Huan." Auntie Lan deliberately teased him. "Go ahead. I know you don't have a daughter in your heart. You only have a wife." Chin Mo went over and hugged her. The old woman kissed her face. Auntie Lan too. Auntie Lan said, "Little guy, don't use your honey trap on me. It won't work." Chin Mo walked out with a smile and slowly went upstairs. In the master bedroom on the second floor, the hostess was sleeping soundly. She slept soundly on her side, which made people want to catch her and beat her up. Chin Mo quietly watched her for a while. He walked over to the bed and sat down. He reached out and pinched her face. Yi Huan thought it was Yi Huan, so she buried her face in the pillow. "Yi Huan, stop it. Let Mommy sleep a little longer. All you do is eat and sleep. What a pig." Chin Mo directly put his hand through her hair, held her head and kissed her. Chapter 4370. Yi Huan had finally woken up. When she opened her eyes, she saw Chin Mo's handsome face. His strength was on her lips. He was kissing her. Yi Huan's eyes widened. She just stared at him, as if she had forgotten to react. But after a while, she completely woke up. She put her hands on his shoulders and wanted to push him away. However, Chin Mo hugged her tightly at the same time, and it became a deep kiss. Yi Huan grunted and passively accepted it. She was pressed under the blanket. After the kiss, he was busy with other things. Yi Huan looked up with difficulty and said in a hoarse voice, "Chin Mo, what is this?" He kissed other places and said in a hoarse voice, "You haven't seen me for a few days. You heartless little thing. Don't you miss me?" Yi Huan's eyes were wet. She knew what he wanted to do. She bit her lips and said, "No." Chin Mo propped himself up and kissed her fiercely. Then Yi Huan screamed. Still don't want it? His voice was deep and husky. It sounded very sexual. Huan glared at him and whimpered. She struggled with all her might, but her wrist was still held by him. Her eyes were filled with tears. She glared at him, unwilling to give in or beg. Chinemo chuckled and leaned over to kiss her lips. You don't mean what you say. He was very happy, but considering that Auntie Lan's lunch was almost ready, he didn't dare to indulge too much. In the end, he kissed her. I'll go down first. You can go down after tidying up. As he said that, he pulled up his clothes. Huan was speechless. She glared at him. Chinemo smiled again. I'm going down. Hurry up, or Auntie Lan will be suspicious. He raised his hand to look at his watch. It's been less than 20 minutes. She probably won't think too much about it. As soon as he said that, Huan threw a pillow at him. It hit him right in the face. Chinemo caught it expressionlessly. You have to change your habit of throwing things at people. As he said that, he smiled and walked out. Huan sat up and scratched his head. Chinemo, did you come back just to do this? Aren't you going to explain? He turned around and smiled charmingly. I thought you didn't need to explain. Besides, based on my many years of experience, we both enjoyed ourselves just now. Huan, don't say that you didn't want to. Your body doesn't show that. Huan threw something at him again. He was a big jerk. Chinemo went downstairs. He wanted to explain, but not now. When he went downstairs, Auntie Lan smiled when she saw him. You must be tired. Have some fruit to fill your stomach. Chinmo's face was slightly hot. Aunt Lan. Auntie Lan smiled knowingly. How can a young couple not be greedy? As she said that, she wiped her hands and prepared to call Huan back for dinner. However, when she was outside, she called out to Chinemo, hurry, there's a girl outside. She even brought something for Huan. Chinemo went out immediately and saw Huan standing in front of the black door. Outside the door was none other than Ai Meng Meng. She had changed into casual clothes and was holding a cute rabbit in her hand. It was probably for Huan. When she saw Chinemo, Ai Meng Meng shrunk and lowered her eyes. I just wanted to come over to thank her. Chinemo hugged Huan and handed her over to Auntie Lan. He reached out and took the rabbit. I'll keep it for her. Ai Meng Meng's eyes were watery. President Qin, I'm really sorry. I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1. Husband, addicted to pampering. Talking about life and looking for confidants. Chapter 4371. You don't need to apologize. I hope my forgiveness can help you turn over a new leaf. Chinemo said calmly. I also believe that you came to thank Huan, so I'll accept it for her. As for the future, don't come looking for her. Ai Meng Meng nodded. Yes, I won't disturb you in the future. Although she really wanted to hug Huan and apologize personally, when Ai Meng Meng left, her gaze fell on Huan, who was behind Chinemo. She was such a cute little girl. She had always wanted to use Huan to achieve her own goals. She was wrong, very wrong. If she could make it up to her, she was willing to give everything she had to make it up to her. Ai Meng Meng looked at Huan, and Huan looked back at her. Suddenly, Huan struggled out of Auntie Lan's arms and picked up the bunny from her father's hands. She walked to Ai Meng Meng and smiled. Huan had recently lost her teeth. When she smiled, she looked even cuter and less adorable. She hugged the bunny and said softly, I know you. You're the big sister who drew my blood. Dad said your name is Meng Meng. Ai Meng Meng bit her lip, not knowing what to say. Huan suddenly walked to the side and pressed a black button. Then the black carved door slowly opened. Huan ran over and hugged Ai Meng Meng. While Ai Meng Meng was stunned, she said in a small and shy voice, Thank you. Then Huan ran back. She was always a shy little girl. Chinemo looked at Ai Meng Meng. She won't know anything. Thank you. Ai Meng Meng's voice was slightly choked. President Qin, I'm sorry. She bent over and took a long time to straighten up. Then, she saw Huan. She mumbled an apology again. It was a little embarrassing, but she still said it. Huan was quite indifferent and didn't say anything. To her, Ai Meng Meng was a stranger. But now that so many things had happened, it meant that this girl was closely related to them. Ai Ming Ming was still biting her lips so hard that they were about to break. In the end, she still left. He Huan looked at her back and said faintly, "Chinemo, can you explain it now?" Chinemo looked at her, and then at Auntie Lan. Auntie Lan immediately said, "Oh, it's time to eat. If you two have a meeting, you can have it later. It won't be good if Yi Huan is hungry." Chinemo immediately said, "Yeah, it would be bad if Yi Huan got hungry." Yi Huan glared at him, and then went back to the villa. After dinner, Chinemo had nothing to hide. He asked Auntie Lan to take care of Yi Huan while he went to the study. After a while, Yi Huan came over and closed the door. Chinemo sat behind his desk and smoked. He stared at Yi Huan for a long time before smiling faintly. "Why didn't you ask? Didn't you suspect that I gave her the watch?" As he said that, he took out a box from the drawer. "This is for you." Yi Huan walked over and opened the box. It was the same as she remembered. But she wasn't an idiot. She closed the box and smiled. "Did you think that I would think that the one in Ai Ming Ming's hand was an imitation just because you bought another one?" Chinemo stood up and walked behind Yi Huan. He pressed on her shoulders and leaned over. "Look, she has another one. She probably has to sell it to survive. Are you still angry?" Yi Huan was furious. "Chinemo, you're just sophistry." Chapter 4372. It's an excuse. But you like it too, don't you? He smiled and bit her earlobe. "Are you still angry?" Yi Huan immediately broke free from him. "Don't give me that." As she spoke, she walked to the sofa and sat down, still looking very angry. Chinemo smiled, stared at her for a while, and walked to her side. "I'm going to explain now. Do you want to hear it?" "Up to you." Yi Huan flipped through the magazine. But she quickly stopped what she was doing. Chinemo sighed softly. "Yi Huan has panda blood." "I know." Yi Huan's voice was gloomy. Then Chinemo continued. "You know how precious blood is. It'll be very dangerous in an emergency, so there's Ai Ming Ming." Yi Huan suddenly bit her lip. Chinemo said cruelly, "There will be Li Ming Ming, Zhang Ming Ming, and Yi Huan in the future. Do you think I'll draw blood from you?" Yi Huan glared at him. Chinemo smiled again. His smile was carefree. "You must be thinking that since you also have panda blood, you'll be able to live well. What I did was unnecessary." This time, Yi Huan didn't say anything. She just looked at him quietly. Chinemo exhaled. "Ever since you lost your blood for the first time in middle school, your deskmate has always had panda blood. It's the same for you when you're studying abroad. Even your assistants and secretaries when you're a director all have panda blood." Yi Huan was shocked. She looked at him quietly, and didn't say anything for a long time. Chinemo put his hand on her shoulder, and pulled her into his arms. His voice was hoarse. "Yi Huan, now you know why I want to support Ai Ming Ming. Why that watch appeared on her hand. There doesn't seem to be any cause and effect." Yi Huan glanced at him. "All men with self-control know their limits. Obviously you don't." Chinemo. After saying that, she wanted to leave. Anyway, she already knew what she wanted to know. But she only took one step before he pulled her back to the sofa. This time, she was sitting on his lap. Yi Huan was a little annoyed. "Let go of me, bastard." Chinemo sat on the sofa smartly dressed, his fingers gently caressing her face. "I'm a bastard. Do you want to see what a real jerk looks like?" I already knew that. She knew what he wanted to do. Biting her lips, she struggled with all her might. But the more she struggled, the more unbearable it became. Chinmo's body stiffened, and then he said in a hoarse voice, "Yi Huan, if I could, I'd rather be the one who got hurt that night." His eyes were fixed on hers as he spoke, and after a moment of silence he released her. Then he walked behind his desk, took out a cigarette and started smoking. Yi Huan was also sitting in his original position. Actually, he was already in a mess because of his flirting. This bastard just pulled away and left. What the hell was he doing? After smoking half a cigarette, Chinemo looked up and said in a slightly reserved manner, "If you don't want to, I won't do it anymore." After saying that, he continued smoking. He didn't say anything else. He didn't say anything about breaking up with her. And he didn't say anything about where Yi Huan belonged. But Yi Huan could smell the Cold War from his attitude. Especially in the afternoon. When he left the villa, he didn't take Yi Huan with him. He only asked Yi Huan to send Yi Huan to kindergarten during the day. Yi Huan agreed absent-mindedly and watched his car leave. Auntie Lan followed her gaze and sighed faintly. How pretentious. Otherwise, the night would be so beautiful. Chapter 4373. Yi Huan was speechless. She turned back to look at Auntie Lan, unable to say anything for a long time. Auntie Lan smiled. Do you miss him now? The old lady went back to wash up. She did not understand the world of youngsters. Yi Huan stood there for a while looking outside. Then, Yi Huan tugged at her hand. Mummy, did Daddy quarrel with you? Yi Huan squatted down. No, Daddy has a job. Yi Huan's expression was a little strange. But Daddy said that he likes Mummy more. Yi Huan cursed inwardly. Of all the things that Qin Mo could have taught, he had to teach Yi Huan this. She brought Yi Huan back. Dinner was for the three women to eat together. At night, Yi Huan gave Yi Huan a bath. After a few days, she was already very familiar with it. At night, she slept with Yi Huan. She told a fairy tale to Yi Huan. Yi Huan's eyes were about to close as she listened. After a while, she said in a very soft and sleepy voice, Mummy, I miss Daddy. Yi Huan was stunned. Then she kissed her forehead. Call Daddy tomorrow morning. But I miss him now. Yi Huan grew up like a princess. Qin Mo was always at her beck and call. Yi Huan thought about it and agreed. She took out her phone and dialed Qin Mo's number. The call went through. It sounded like he was in a bar. Yi Huan frowned. She heard Qin Mo's cold voice. What's the matter? Yi Huan bit her lip. Yi Huan wants to talk to you. As she spoke, she passed the phone to Yi Huan. Yi Huan had no idea about the turbulence of the adult world. She spoke to Qin Mo in a sweet voice. And after a few minutes she yawned, tilted her head and fell asleep. Yi Huan took the phone from her hand. She looked at it again. The call had been hung up. She sighed speechlessly. She felt that Qin Mo was a little childish. However, she knew in her heart that because of the panda blood around her, she always had some different feelings towards him. And this man took the opportunity to be arrogant. Yi Huan tossed her phone aside and lay flat on the bed. On the other side of B City, Qin Mo and Lan Yu were sitting face to face in a bar. It was already 10 o'clock at night. Lan Yu raised his hand to look at his watch. It's 10 o'clock. Are you really not going back to Yi Huan's place? As he spoke, he looked like he was about to get up. Qin Mo reached out to stop him. You've only been sitting here for a while and you're leaving. Have you become a eunuch under Chunchin's control? Lan Yu chuckled. I'm sure that in bed. I'm a man and Chunchin is a woman. Qin Mo gave him a mocking look. How could I not know your tricks? Can you give me some face? Lan Yu glanced at him. Then he picked up his glass and drank his wine. He said slowly, Oh yes, Yi Huan is single now. She's young and rich. I've seen her recently, and she's much prettier. Chunchin said that men like this type. Don't you worry about leaving her alone at home? Qin Mo glared at Lan Yu. Don't give me that. Yi Huan doesn't like anyone else. What about Rongyu? Speaking of this, Lan Yu smiled. His son used to be called Rongyu, but because Qin Mo cared, he changed it to Lan Yu. Of course he felt much better. Qin Mo's expression was even worse. Looking at his brother-in-law's handsome face, he really wanted to punch it and smash the smugness on his face. Chapter 4374. However, the arrogant President Qin wouldn't do that. He just picked up his coat and walked out. Lan Yu was still sitting where he was. He finished half a glass of wine in his hand and walked out of the bar. Qin Mo was already in the car. Lan Yu was relieved when he saw that the driver was driving. He turned around and got into the car. Qin Mo returned to his old apartment. He tossed and turned on the bed but couldn't fall asleep. He hated a certain little guy in his heart, but he couldn't do anything to her. The next morning in the villa, Yi Huan woke up. The first thing she did was to check if there was a call. There was no call. She stared blankly for a while and realized that he was really angry. It was her rejection. Yi Huan dragged Yi Huan up, took care of the little girl's clothes and food, and sent her to school. After that, she also went to the studio. She hadn't been there for a few days and was busy with some things. Especially Twin had been edited, and she had to watch it several times. After being busy for a long time in the studio, when she was hungry, she received a call from Chin Mo. His tone was not very good. Yi Huan, you left Yi Huan at the kindergarten and don't need to pick her up? Yi Huan was stunned for a moment. It was already 5 in the afternoon. She had indeed missed the time to pick her up. I'll go right away. She packed her things and went downstairs to drive to the school. At the school gate, Chin Mo's Mulsan was parked there. Chin Mo was bringing Yi Huan out from the school, and the person beside him wasn't Secretary He, but a very beautiful female star. She was a second-tier star, had a good figure, and was also young. Yi Huan knew that when Chin Mo dealt with his personal affairs, he never had a woman by his side, and the one beside him might be the new love he had chosen. She felt a little uncomfortable in her heart, but her face was indifferent. I won't come if you say you're coming. Chin Mo looked at her. You didn't give birth to the child? His attitude was really bad, and Yi Huan had no choice. Just as she was about to say something, she felt dizzy and her body swayed. Only then did she remember that she had not eaten today. It had been a day. Chin Mo also noticed that she didn't look well, and could guess why. He picked up little Yi Huan and threw her into the back seat of his car. Then he looked at Yi Huan and said, "Get in the car." Yi Huan also knew that she couldn't drive now, so she thought that Chin Mo would let the little star drive her car. However, Chin Mo didn't. He even opened the front passenger door for the beautiful girl and let her sit beside him. Although Yi Huan knew that he was angry at her, she still felt very uncomfortable. Her eyes were a little hot, and she turned her head to the side. Chin Mo got into the car, fastened his seatbelt, and whispered something to the girl beside him before driving off. Yi Huan heard him asking about the restaurant. Since when did he have to ask others for food? With Yi Huan's personality, she would immediately turn around and leave, but with Yi Huan around, she couldn't do anything and could only endure it. The car drove steadily, and surprisingly, it stopped in less than 5 minutes. The girl got out of the car first, and Chin Mo drove for another 2 minutes before stopping in the parking lot of a restaurant. He unbuckled his seatbelt. Vegetarian restaurant, a new one in B City. Isn't it quite popular recently? Yi Huan pursed her lips. I thought you would eat with the 4 of us. It's not convenient, he said mysteriously, and Yi Huan was so angry that she gritted her teeth. Chapter 4375. Yi Huan just looked at him and did not say anything. Chin Mo carried Yi Huan and walked in front while Yi Huan followed behind him. When they arrived at the restaurant, it was quiet, and there weren't many people. Chin Mo found a seat by the window, and Yi Huan sat beside him. Chin Mo called the waiter over and ordered 2 snacks for Yi Huan and Yi Huan to fill their stomachs. Then he ordered his own food. Yi Huan did not care. He knew her taste, so she ate the snacks to ease her hunger. Chin Mo seemed to be very busy. He had been using his phone to deal with things. Later on, he ate casually. Yi Huan, on the other hand, felt that the dishes here were pretty good. After eating until her stomach was full, she stretched and then met Chin Mo's gaze. I have something to do later. The chauffeur will send you back at the entrance of the restaurant, Chin Mo said briefly. Yi Huan couldn't say whether she was disappointed or not. She was already in a cold war with him. Or perhaps they were in the midst of breaking up. Yi Huan, on the other hand, was disappointed. She looked at Chin Mo and said in a crisp voice, Daddy, aren't you coming home today? The petite person hugged his neck softly. Chin Mo had always doted on her. Usually, he would let go of any important matters. However, at this moment, he still said that he had something to deal with and would go over later. Yi Huan pursed her lips when she heard that he was going. Chin Mo handed Yi Huan to her and said calmly, I have a party to attend. You and Yi Huan can sleep first. Yi Huan could not refuse in front of the child, so she nodded and agreed. Chin Mo sent them to the door. The chauffeur, Mr. Zhang, was already there. He opened the door for Yi Huan and said goodbye to Chin Mo before driving away. In the car, Yi Huan opened her big round eyes. Mommy, who is the pretty girl in Daddy's car today? Yi Huan was a little distracted. She's a colleague from the company. Are all the girls in Dad's company so beautiful? If that's the case, won't it be dangerous? Yihuan must have watched too much TV and knew a lot. Yihuan smiled. Celebrities are all very pretty, Yihuan said sweetly. Mommy is prettier than them. Little liar. Yihuan kissed her. Say that to your mother every day from now on. Yihuan's expression was indescribable. Yihuan brought Yihuan back to the villa. It was getting late, and Auntie Lan had already finished her dinner. Seeing Yihuan carrying Yihuan back, she immediately caught up with them. Is the little girl asleep? Yihuan nodded. I fell asleep in the car. Auntie Lan wanted to ask something, but she didn't. In the end, she just wanted to help Yihuan carry Yihuan. Let me carry him, Auntie Lan. Yihuan's voice was soft. I can carry him. You go to sleep first. She knew that Auntie Lan was old and went to bed early, so Yihuan had been coaxing Yihuan by herself. Although Yihuan was only a few years old, her body was quite chubby. Yihuan was also sweating all over as she carried her upstairs. However, the little girl woke up as soon as she reached the small bed, and then subconsciously wanted to hug Yihuan to sleep. Yihuan stayed with her for about half an hour before the little girl fell asleep. Only then did she get away and gently wipe Yihuan's little hands and feet with a hot towel. When she was wiping them, there was an indescribable feeling in her heart. It was warm. After doing all this, Yihuan straightened up, stretched, and bent down to kiss little Yihuan. Only then did she go back to her bedroom to take a shower, change into pajamas, and lie in bed. Chapter 4376. Actually, there were some jobs that she could have done, but she was too lazy to do anything. She sat on the bed in a daze for a while before taking out her phone to check the time. It was already past 10. In the end, she used her laptop to watch a movie and fell asleep halfway through. Chinemo came back after 12 o'clock. His classic black and white suit made him look even more handsome. He pushed the door open and saw Yihuan leaning against the headboard. She was probably asleep, and the laptop beside her was glowing blue. He looked at it quietly and kept it for her. However, he also saw the title of the movie. It was an animation. With that, Yihuan woke up. She glanced at him, probably still in a daze. She said, "You're back," and fell asleep. Chinemo looked at her silently. She was probably alone at home. She was actually wearing spaghetti straps in her silk pajamas. Moreover, because she was thin, she looked very sexy. Especially the back of her neck, it was very beautiful. Every time Chinemo hugged her, he would hug her from behind and kiss that spot. Because of that thought, his Adam's apple rolled a few times before he went to the changing room to take his bathrobe to the bathroom. He didn't have any clothes here and was just making do. After all, they weren't husband and wife and they were in a cold war. He didn't know what Yihuan was thinking or how she viewed their relationship. But now he felt that it was pretty good. When Chinemo took a shower, Yihuan woke up. She pulled the blanket, not knowing if Chinemo would. However, as soon as she opened her eyes, she smelled a perfume. It was a very sweet smell. It should be used by young girls. And the one in the car today was wearing it. She saw Chinmo's jacket. It was a different one. She took it over and sniffed it. It was his jacket. At that moment, Chinemo came out of the bathroom. He looked at her quietly and asked calmly, "What's wrong?" He didn't say it, but there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. Yihuan naturally wouldn't admit that she was smelling his jacket. She put it down and lay down. "I'm going to sleep." He nodded and took his clothes. "I'll sleep in the guest room." Yihuan was surprised. She thought that he would sleep with her when he came back. After being startled for a moment, she didn't say anything. She only said a faint good night. Chinemo stared at her for a while. "Good night." After saying that, he took his phone and left. Tears welled up in Yihuan's eyes. Whether it was true or not, he was doing it again. When they were in a cold war, it wasn't like he didn't have women before. She knew that, but she convinced herself that it was all in the past. Now that they were divorced, it was normal for him to find another woman if he couldn't stand the loneliness. He didn't have to deliberately let her know under her nose. Yihuan shouldn't have cared, but her eyes still turned red. She covered the quilt with her hand and wiped her reddened eyes. He still felt a little uncomfortable. Her eyes were a little swollen after the night, and she couldn't hide it even with the foundation. Because she had to send Yi-Hwan to school, she had to get up early to tidy herself up. On the other hand, Yi-Hwan was taken care of by Chin and Mo. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.